Wing Talk, party time, excellent. Hey everybody, it's Wing Talk, and this is a great show today because we've got a lot of good things to talk about today. First, I'm going to throw it over to my partner in crime, the tech master himself, Mr. Mark Hoffman. Mark, how you doing today?
Yeah, hi Steve. I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward for a great show again.
Awesome. Are you flying there in Germany? You're getting out and doing stuff?
Yes, I was flying today, a short session, but it was really stormy and windy around here, so it was not much fun with the ARing. But then I flew a few packs with my quadcopters just to get to make sense of the walk I did.
Fantastic. Again, coming back to us, we have our very, very important sidekick, Mr. Darren Lines. Mr. Darren Lines, what's going on, babes?
Yeah, everything's going good. I think you're overplaying the importance there, but one thing I will say is you're going to have to get a Wing Talk hat now if you keep doing that at the beginning of each stream.
And one guitar, Wing Talk, party time, excellent. Yeah. The thing is like you have the hair, but I don't, unfortunately.
That's true. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we have a special guest today coming back to us for a second time because the guy was so dynamic. And actually what happened was last time we had him on, we stopped recording after about 90 minutes, and then Mark and Luke decided to go after each other for like about 2 hours. They were just kind of back and forth, and it was just really lively. So Darren and I were sitting there watching, and we're like, we should like have Luke back and talk about electrical issues and things like that and how to make things better. So we are going to get to Luke in a couple minutes here, but first, we've been teasing all week the big introduction of something really important for the group. So I wanted to just kind of like let you know, put it all in perspective. First and foremost, I should say that Facebook, the group, there's nothing changing about the group in Facebook. It's still the same group. Really nothing is going to change about it. But what we uncovered was there's a bunch of issues, unfortunately, when it came to Facebook, and that is how we share information. And unfortunately, well, I'll put it to you this way. When we first started the group, within the first few months, we didn't really have a lot of expertise in the group, and we had really more questions than answers. And then one day, one of the members decided to take some notes from one of Powell's videos, and Powell had like about 40 videos at the time, but he took the notes on 2 of his videos and put it up in the group, and everyone was like, wow, this is fantastic. And the topic was how to set up a flight controller. And I mean, I looked at the notes, and they were good, but they were really kind of brief and not very well explained. So I went back in, I watched his videos and followed the notes, and I just kind of added to them. And then we put it up on the group as a guide, and it was the first guide we put out. And about a month later, a guy from Germany says, I see people that, that's a good start, but people are asking the same questions over and over again. I can write a, troubleshooting manual. And so Mark Hoffman, that was the first thing he did. And then I asked him to write the modes manual. And while you're at it, can you, he decided to go off on his own and started writing manuals like how to do auto launch, and then the all-important one, which was the masterclass tuning. And that one is like a really important document. And with that, all of a sudden, people like Powell and INAV started really paying attention to what we could offer. And then Mark and I got together and we started talking about what we could do as far as making an OpenTX master build so that we can get all the modes working on the radio. And we went back and forth about a month, and then we put that, photos of what we were talking about doing as far as switch assignment to the group, and people would weigh in and they would give their opinions. And then when we were ready, we put it out there like, hey, can someone program the radio for us? And Darren Lines stepped up and did it. And we were really anticipating something about right here. We were just kind of like, we're happy with just something basic and people can kind of figure it out. But Darren took it way the hell up to here. And from that, it was like, we went, wow, this is really insane. This is really good. And people really appreciate it. then we started noticing, like about 2 months later, that the documents, we put this in the file section, the zip file and the PDF, and about 2 months later, people had buried it with, files that they had of prints and things like that. So then what's happened recently is we had the AR wing build. It was something that I did. I made an AR wing for a friend, and I just photographed it with my cell phone before I sent it off. And I kind of had to give a recipe, which is, if you follow this formula, you buy all these parts and put it together, and we give you the diff file at the very end of the document. If you do all of this, you should be able to get an AR wing up and running, especially if you use Darren's OpenTX build and you have an OpenTX radio. And so what we did, I showed it to Andrew Newton, and Andrew's like, hey, this looks kind of cool. Wouldn't mind doing it for myself. And I said, Andrew, as long as you're doing that, can you please make a video of the process? And he's like, sure, I'd love to, which is great. Then all of a sudden, the group grew by about 10% in a period of a few weeks. So there's a lot of demand out there, but what it did is, unfortunately, emphasize the problem, which is we can't really give you information accurately as far as, it's to this minute, it's still, we have documents, I write them in Google Docs, and Mark writes his in Microsoft Office, and it's kind of a mess. And, we tried our best to show it that way, but it's just not something that people really can respond to, and it doesn't really get shared. And unfortunately, the information, when people find it and we give it to them, they're like, wow, this is fantastic. Why didn't you tell me this before? And we're like, well, we tried to. But so what we decided to do was we needed to put together a separate website, and we needed to have all the information really well displayed on the website. But when we started working on the website, it was kind of like, in the past week, we started putting this together. We started seeing, like, there is so much more we could do with this. And this is so big. It's going to help the group so much. So I'm really excited to have Darren take over. When it comes to the website, I'm going to say this. Darren is going to be in charge of the website. So Darren and Mark are pretty much running this. And, I'm still running the Facebook group. But these guys are in charge of this and making sure that you have the guides. And they've got so many cool ideas. Like, once we started, and once they just started putting it together, it was just fantastic. So, Darren, can you take it away and show us this beautiful website you've been working on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as you say, we wanted something nice and easy to find. So we've set up inavfixedwinggroup.com. So it's, if you know the group name, you know the website. It's nice and easy to find. We've got on the homepage, we're going to have a brief overview of certain things, like a history of the group and the YouTube videos relating to the group. So the wing talks, when the next one's going to come up, it will be on the homepage. And also you'll notice we've got some guides. Now, at the moment, it's not everything. As Steve said, we've been pretty much working flat out on this for a week, and it's taking quite a lot to get the guides over. But eventually we'll have everything. We'll have more guides, and everything will be great. But yeah, we have a section for the guides. So at the moment, this is what we have, but there will be more following. This is all stuff that is on the Facebook group, but it's hard to find. It's in links,
right,
that are buried in units, that sort of thing.
So we're looking at
everything is nice and easy to find.
I'm looking at the AR wing right there, and that was the one document I was talking about a minute ago. And also the getting started document was just basically, if you don't know anything about what it takes to get started with INAV for fixed wing, it was just kind of a quick list of all the different things you're going to need. And I kind of give you a price range of what everything's going to cost you, so you know what you're into. So those are my only two contributions. Sorry, Darren.
No problem. But yeah, as I said, these are the basic guides. So the really important stuff we've tried to get up. So Nav Launch is up, the getting started guides up, the beginner build, troubleshooting. We've got all that sort of stuff up.
Oh, one thing I should mention though, the one guide that we don't have up yet is the Masterclass Tuning Guide. And the reason is because that is such an important document. It is really kind of like, it might need to be about 5 or 6 different documents because there's so much to it, and it's so good. I was just going through it. We started to put it up and then realized like we need to explain things a little bit more and maybe make some videos along the way. So you'll have that inside the guides. You'll have videos also kind of nestled into the guides. And can you do us a favor and show us like one of the guides, open one up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, with regard to the tuning guide, we were going to put up a basic version, what was currently already available, but Mark's actually going to go over the PID tuning part as well. So the PID tuning section will be completely rewritten, but the rest of it is fine. So we will have a base version up soon, but then we will enhance it with videos and stuff like that later on. But yeah, so just a quick look at a guide. So this is the setup for Nav Launch. So this is how to set it up properly without the need for the shake and bake. And it's all set up. It's got nice contents at the beginning. Everything is in sections. It should all be really easy to read.
And you can also save this as a PDF?
Not at the moment. I am looking into that.
Okay.
But at the moment, unfortunately not. You probably can save the whole website or just copy and paste it into Word and save it as a PDF. But at the moment, it's I am looking into it, but it's not there yet. But as you think, it's quite a long document, but it's nicely laid out, and I will, as soon as possible, get it into PDF format. Another section that we've been working on, a lot of people have been asking about, is actual plane setups. So this is the first leg. So obviously, as we go on, more will be added. So this is the Dart 250G. So if I go to long range, it should appear in both. So we have a setup for the AR wing and the Dart 250G for long range. And in here, these are brief guides, so you can compare what you want, basically. So it will give you an overview of the model, the specifications when it's built, the components you'll need, a list of components.
I have to say, that is beautiful. Look at that. Absolutely. You did an outstanding job on this, guys. It's just unbelievable. Look at that. And he has Mark's videos. I'm flying. I actually showed it to my brother-in-law. He's just getting into quads right now. And he's like, how much is that plane?
Yeah.
So
the thing is, it's a $60 plane. So even I'm tempted to get one of those. But
there's
one
the
of
CLI
the
settings
people
right there.
always ask about is the CLI settings. So
yes,
for these builds, they are on the bottom, but we should probably state that if they're okay, as long as you build it to the specifications, you still probably will need to tweak them slightly, but for these specifications, they're fine. So you may have seen a list of components. Another thing that we're also working on is shopping lists of recommended parts. So under flight controllers at the moment, we have these parts. We will be putting the links in. We just haven't got around to it yet, but that will be coming soon, and the shopping list will be filled up with more recommended components.
So one thing I should mention right here, as it comes to the shopping list, was that Mark started to ask people, in Germany where he lives, hey, can some of you guys give me some of your planes so I can tune them? And people have been offering up all sorts of planes from Mark, and he's been working on them. But one of the things we're looking at is when we want to, first we want to make sure that people in the group can add to this. And so this is something that you'll have to work with Darren and Mark on, as far as they have a certain format about how to add stuff. But when it comes to building a plane, like if Mark builds one, he wants to build it from the ground up. He wants to put all the parts in, not what someone else has put in a plane. So what we're looking at in the future is being able to do that, actually buy planes and build them the way we want to build them, and then write the specifications so that it's all brand new. The plane hasn't been crashed yet. Mark will be sure to break it in for him. And then we'll give out really good specifications. And the goal is ultimately is like, if we do this, Mark and I don't know if Darren feels the same way, but Mark and I feel the same way, which is we have enough planes. I mean, we're kind of like running out of space to put planes. So when we do this, what we'd like to do is be able to turn around and give them to a group member. And excuse me. And so what it's going to take is we need to have some kind of source of funding. So all of these things you're looking at right now are going to have affiliate links on it, and you're not obligated to click on the affiliate links, but if you do, this is what we're aiming for, is funding planes and doing builds and doing all the neat stuff. But we also have group members. One guy comes to mind is Christian Moe. He's like Mr. S800. I mean, he has the S800 absolutely figured out perfectly, and so if he puts up his specifications, like they're good to go, because he's built that plane 6 times already. So anyways, sorry, Darren.
Yeah, I sort of feel the same way. I think I'm running out of space for planes, but I don't think I've got enough yet. That's all. But yeah, so anyway, so that's the shopping list. Another thing that we're going to add is member resources. So the top link is the INAV group map. So that's nice and easy to find, because it's something else that can sort of get buried in the group. So if you don't remember what this is, it's a nice easy way of finding local fellow people from the group. So as you can see, it's quite a busy map already, and there's not many places in the world that's not covered, so you can find someone that's in the group local to you. And if you want to be added to this, I believe you go to the thread in the on our fixed wing group on Facebook and just leave a comment in there, and Steve will add you.
Right. Every time people sign up, if they have their city listed, I put them in right as they sign up.
Cool.
But that's usually about half the members. So we only have like about, I'd say, maybe 35% of the members on the group are on this map. So, for every pin you see, there's probably 2 more.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's nice and easy to find now. And what we also have is blogs and YouTube channels for group members, which we will pad out and expand more. So people with channels, if you get in contact, we can sort that out as well. So that's a basic overview. One thing that's not on there at the moment is the OpenTX model. That's one thing I'll be looking to get on there very quickly. And as I say, we've been working on it a week, but it is just the initial version. There will be a lot of more stuff coming. So yeah, if you get out and use it, it's
fantastic. You did a beautiful job with this. Mark, do you have anything you want to say about the website?
I think Darren was pretty fine at explaining everything right now. So one thing, or one additional word to the plane setups. So we want to be sure to have flight proven stuff on there. So all the configuration I have put there in the CAI configuration everything is well tuned. Everything is just we just have the information in there that are applicable for the plane and for the flight performance, but not for your configuration, like your radio control setup, your mode setup, and all that stuff. That's kept aside. So you can completely take this CAI configuration right now for INAV 2.4 mainly and put it on your setup if you use the same or at least the same specification components as in this list for the setup. And as Steve already said, we want to try to get our hands on more planes. We will not just put something together and fly it and then put the setup there, but we want to make sure that everything flies as good as possible, as good as it can for specific purposes. So Steve already worked on the AR-Wing beginner setup in the past. It was a really big document with all the explanation, what parts and how to set it up and how to put it together and all that stuff. So I will also work on that to get it in there to have a really cheap entry-level AR-Wing build beside the long-range setup and beside the performance setup we already have. So this is everything. This is all stuff that will come in the future, one after another.
Right, and these guys are going to keep working on it. And we keep asking members as to what their favorite planes are, and we keep a list of all the different planes. And so we're going to try working on, planes that will. I guess the best thing is to explain is like, once you build your first AR-Wing, a lot of people will write. Well, actually, first plane they'll write in and they'll say, "Okay, I built this plane. I need the next one. What should I use?" You go here, you're not gonna have any questions. And the one other thing I'll say is that one of the builds, I guess you had a speed build for the AR-Wing, And so it's with an air B motor. And I actually, yeah, can you show that one?
Yeah, sure.
This one, I actually did this one. I actually borrowed his specs and kind of built it. And I just had my first flight with it this morning. So there's that air B motor. It's a T motor. That's beautiful. Oh my God, I took that thing up and I haven't shaked that much in a long time because the speed on this thing is incredible. And I mean, I shot myself up to about 300 meters before I even know what I was doing. It was just so fast and it's so easy to fly. But I mean, I went back and watched the flight videos. It was rock solid, perfect. So Mark, thank you so much for doing that. It's just a really great build. And in March, so he has 3 different builds on that. I have a feeling that at some point we're going to have about 10 different AR wing builds in this. There we go. Yeah, there's the motors. And so you use that is a beautiful plane.
Yeah, I can.
You need to stick 6S in it next time, though, Steve. Not 3.
I don't know. I think 8S.
Yeah, I mean, I just have my airing here right now. So I was flying it today, but it was a little bit too windy. So with winds of gusts like up to 50 kilometers per hour, it was not much fun. It was flying, it was fighting the wind well, but it's not too much fun. And I had my planned 6S propeller on there. So I've not flown it yet on 6S. Just the propeller is on there, but I forgot to charge the battery, so I stuck with 4S today.
Oh, jeez, even 4S is like a handful with this plane.
Yeah.
It's just, how much does yours weigh? Off topic here.
Mine is at 960 or 970 gram, I think.
Yeah, mine is 877. So yeah, and the other AR wing builds I have are in the 700s. So the long range one that with the Sunny Sky X2212 1400 kV, that one is, oh my God, that is beautiful. That's something I feel like rewriting the document and putting that in there. That's like, it's a $25 motor, but it's worth every penny. So that's definitely. So that was the second build Mark did, which was long range. And so, but guys, this is fantastic. And when people want to add stuff to the group to this doc, they want to help out. And that was the thing I was trying to get across to people is like, if you got a plane you really like and set up well, you can contact Darren and Mark, and they will help you get it up on the site here so that you can share your specs with other people.
Yeah, we'll make that nice and easy in the future. As you say, Christian obviously has got the S800 wrapped up. But yeah, if you've got a plane that's flying great and you have all the specs, all the CLI that Mark mentioned earlier, I don't really want to put a timeline, but very soon we'll have a method of getting it on there and giving you obviously attribution for getting it all sorted. So that will be coming very soon. But most likely in the early stages, it'll be emailing the document over to us, and then we'll get it on the site. But everything will be attributed to whoever wrote it.
I can think about again. A lot of these will come natural. Like David Story, he absolutely loves the Wing, and so he has a perfect setup for the Wing, and that's one of his favorite planes. He bought a couple of them, so he'd be a perfect example. It's not like when you look at the document I wrote where it was like 50 pages. No, you're not going to do that. These are going to be real simple. Like, here's the speed controller I used. Here's the motor. Here's the battery setup. Here's all the different things, propeller. And then CLI dump and photos of it. And it's going to be something that the average person should be able to do in probably less than an evening.
Yeah. It should be nice and simple, nice and quick for a comparison. Because if we go just to the main page for each type of setup, which we can add to later on, this is just the first 3 types. But the idea is people can scroll through, have a quick look. It's got an estimated cost on there and a brief description of what it does. It's going to be very small. So if you can imagine 9 models on this page, you can say, well, actually that one suits my budget and suits what I'm looking to do. I'll go for that one and have a look at see what's involved in it. So that's the whole point with this section here.
Right. And then we also want to emphasize, well, it's a good thing that Mark built 3 different versions of the same plane so that people get the point. Just because you see a plane listed doesn't mean like we're done with it. You might have a different take on it, and so we'd love to have that as part of, you know, something we can share with the group. So
Well, yeah, I mean, next time Mark needs to do a Dart 250G with an in-runner for speed setup.
Yeah, I already thought about making a high-speed Dart 250G setup. Glenn Thor from the UK, he has actually one. He built one with an T-Motor 1507 3800 kV and run it on 4S. So his top speed was close to 200 kilometers per hour, but then he brought up the motor, unfortunately.
What's the wingspan of the Dart 250?
It's 650.
500, okay. Interesting.
I'm looking at the comments. There's people.
So it's under 600, isn't it?
To be honest, I'm not sure right now.
Yeah, I think it's. I looked it up. It was like 575 or something like that. When you look at the first Dart they had, and the Dart.
Oh yeah, 570.
Right, and so the first Dart I think was like 650 or something like that. So they're not much difference in size, but it's a completely different plane. And this is for whatever reason, Sonic Model seemed to get this right. This Dart is the PHP. You know, you got to be good at. I guess this is probably something good for people who built quads before. The people who are building the 3-inch quads and under, because small parts are used to working on small areas. You know, for a first build, you probably want something a little bit larger, like the AR wing, because there's more space, easier to. If you're like myself, you're not the cleanest guy when it comes to soldering and putting wires in. You know,
yeah.
This is.
Actually, beside the place issues you might get, if you have small fingers like I have, then it's no problem to build this plane at all, and that's why I have also put it in the beginner setup, because it's also pretty cheap. Because the small components, the plane itself, it doesn't really cost much, so it's the cheapest plane in my hangar right now. And to be honest, it makes most fun for me to fly it. So it's a great beginner plane also.
Okay, that's good to hear that. Yeah, and there's a lot of other planes. I mean, at some point we got to get our hands, Mark. We got to get you onto the mini track.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would like to have one, but yeah, it's not worth the money for me right now.
Well, hopefully we could be able to fund that. And then the other one would be the FX61.
The FX61. Yeah, I'm right now I'm planning to help a guy in the group to get his FX61 in the air when it arrives.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, is he in Germany?
No, he is not in Germany.
Okay.
It's a guy also Darren chatted with yesterday.
Yeah, she's from Romania.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So we help him out. That'll be, so planes like that. There's a lot of, we need to get a good C1 chaser put together, HD wing. There's a lot of different planes we need to help out with, so that when you're putting this together, you kind of don't feel so intimidated for your second build. That's this looks like fun. If you see the videos and see members in the group talking about it, at least we can help get you there. And so, guys, this is a fantastic job. I really want to thank you for what you did. And I also was thinking we can probably do a section for OSD screens. I know it would just be somewhere, just the submenu somewhere, but just so that you can quickly grab different OSD screens for PAL or NTSC, and instead of having to, they're kind of personalized stuff, but maybe some good basic ones for beginners.
Yeah, we could put that in a guide for some.
Okay, yeah.
OSD guide with some example setups.
That would be great. Yeah, so you just copy and paste, and OSDs are the kind of thing that you're never done putting them together. And so, speaking of stuff that we're never done putting together, the one thing I think that we keep coming across in the group is issues that come with electrical. And so how do you get things like, how do you get your VTX to not give out so much static when you're flying? How do you get better reception from your antennas? How can you go, there's a lot to this. And of course, the $1 million question is, when it comes to lithium-ion batteries, should you use a spot welder, or can you get by with soldering them?
So this will start a big fight right now, I think.
Let me get right to it.
Do we want to leave this to the start before everyone falls out and lose to the end? Sorry.
So coming back to us for a second time in a row, Luke, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah. How are you guys?
Fantastic. Yeah. So I'm still seeing the screen, the desktop. There we are.
There we go.
Okay. So Luke, do we see Luke here? Is he here?
Yeah, he's
I am
around.
here. Yep.
Okay. I just hear him. I don't see him, unfortunately. So anyway, electrical things. We've been talking pretty much all week long, and where do we start with electrical? Like, I think one of the things that a lot of people will have a question about is video noise. So can you start off by getting in what we can do in order to calm down video noise? I've had people say that you should wrap your ground wire around your video signal wire, and that helps reduce the noise.
Well, this is quite a big subject. That's quite a lot to go from. A good start is to always have one ground point. So having a star topology is what it's called for your ground system. So that means you have one ground going from your battery to your flight controller or whatever, and then they all go out from there. That's always a good start. It eliminates ground loops and that sort of thing. Generally just good practice. Using capacitors to calm noise and that kind of thing is always good.
Okay,
yeah,
so you mentioned capacitors. What is there one particular capacitor you like working with?
I have a particular capacitor that I like working with, and it's generally whichever one I have at the time. As long as it's a low ESR capacitor between 470 and 1000 microfarads, something like that, it's probably fine. There aren't any hard and fast rules. If you want to make a proper low pass filter, then you do have to calculate it, and you have to calculate your inductance and stuff as well. But presuming for just a normal capacitor setup, you don't have to worry too much.
Okay, so 470 microfarads is a good start, and that you put that as close as possible to the ESC.
Well, you want one close to your ESC, one close to your flight controller, one close to your video transmitter. So basically close to the noise creating devices and close to the noise sensitive devices, if you like.
Darren.
Yeah, just a quick question while we're on the subject. I read somewhere that using different, I guess it's not capacity maybe, but different microfarad capacitors will cut out different frequencies in the noise. Can you shed light on that?
That is true to an extent. It's not necessarily so much the energy rating, the farad rating, but more the equivalent series resistance, so the ESR. The lower your equivalent series resistance, the higher frequency it will be able to smooth. And generally for our application, we have very high frequencies from our speed controllers and from like our various other transmitters. So if you're getting interference on your video from your control or telemetry, that's all still very high frequency in the gigahertz range. So generally the lower ESR you can get, the better.
Cool. And then the microfarad just increases the buffer, I guess, What?
Yeah, it increases the buffer. Also, it increases your buffer. That's
So I just asked the chat if we can see Luke, and they're saying yes. For whatever reason, you're hiding from me today. So.
Yeah, I'm watching the stream on my other monitor, and I can see myself, so it's quite disconcerting, really. But
So you did mention, I wanted to get back to this. You said you put one of the low ESR capacitors on. You said one on the ESC, one on the BTX. So you're putting multiple ones on your plane.
Yeah. So with capacitors, you really can't have too many. That's not the case for using ferrite rings or low pass filter and LC filter. But with capacitors, you really can't overdo it. Certainly, you get to a point of diminishing returns where you add more and it doesn't make any improvement, but you're never going to cause problems with too many capacitors, or realistically.
And then somebody asked yesterday in the group, which was a very good question, I thought, was he had some off-brand ones that came out of China, not the good Panasonic ones. So are you opposed to having the off-brand, the cheaper ones from China, or they just throw them away, or are they okay?
I mean, it depends what off-brand ones from China. I'm just looking at the ones I've got. They're from Banggood.
Right.
They're just low ESR capacitors, 220 microfarads. I've got quite a few of. I've got some 470 microfarad ones, and then I do, for my nicer builds, like my long-range plane, for example, I do like to have some Panasonic proper capacitors. Not necessarily because they're any better, but it just makes me feel a little bit warmer inside or whatever. So, yeah.
Okay. So don't throw them away. If you have them, use them, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Even if it's not a low ESR capacitor, you won't get anywhere near as much benefit, but for a really bad setup, it'll definitely help.
Okay, yeah, because that noise is like a continuous issue. And I noticed once I started putting the low ESR capacitors right near the speed controller, it took care of a lot of problems right away.
Yeah. The best solution for killing noise in terms of cost and weight is a proper LC filter. So that's where you have an inductor or a ferrite ring and a capacitor next to each other, and you can often buy those from Banggood as one unit. But
right.
Can have too many of those. If you have more than one of those in a particular circuit, you can have problems. So for the general person, sticking with capacitors is probably a good idea.
Okay, cool. So we got the capacitor.
Yeah, and then some other general things like you want to keep separation. So this isn't so much of a video noise thing, but from an RF perspective, you want to keep separation between all of your noisy components. So you want to ideally have your speed controller far away from your receiver, your transmitter, your GPS, and that kind of thing. One thing that will impact noise is you want motor wires and the motor away from video wires. That can really help. Using coaxial cables for your video and for all signal cables can help a lot.
Mark has something to say.
Yeah, what I realized just today when I was flying the high-speed AR wing, at the moment I had the wrong prop on it, the 6x4.3 prop just on 4S and 1500 kV. Usually I fly this plane with an 8x7 prop, and so the motor has a very high torque load, and the video noise was there, it was visible, but it was okay. But now with the under prop, so the motor has much less load and less current, the noise was really bad. Could that be that if the motor has underload, that the noise gets stronger in the electronics?
Well, typically I would have said if you have a lower current, then there's going to be less RF emission from the motor. But there may be something else at play. Maybe it's the fact that with it being underloaded, it's a higher RPM. So you're getting into a different frequency range that's affecting your video more, maybe. Or it could be a feedback system or something from the speed controller. Maybe I know that the BL Heli ESCs, they have I think a dynamic frequency, so if it's under less load it will use a higher frequency, then maybe that kind of thing. yeah,
Oh,
not
okay.
particularly sure on that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Now you were mentioning placement on the plane, and so we might want to go over this again because this is something that we see a lot of in the group where people will put their video transmitter next to the GPS, for example.
Yeah. I mean, a good example is this plane. Actually, no, it's a terrible example because you can't see any of it. Just let me go and get another plane.
I'm imagining what it looks like.
So,
oh, by the way, Luke will go away every once in a while, and it's not that he's gotten bored of us; he has to reboot his computer. So, then,
yeah, hopefully I've got that sorted now. I made a big effort to try and get that sorted in this last week, so maybe not.
Cool.
So yeah, this is my long-range FPV plane, and it's not ideal because I have the motors on the wings and I have the video line and the receiver line passing straight past the ESC and motor wires. But apart from that, the receiver is right on one end. That's the antenna for the receiver, and the receiver's mounted about here. I have the video transmitter right on the other side, as far out as you can get it on the other wing. I have the camera all the way back on the tail, along with the GPS, and then yeah, the motors can't really do much about them. But that's a good example of at least attempted putting some thought towards.
Okay, so the main things that you wanted to get across is be sure not to have your VTX anywhere near your motor or a video signal near your motor, right? The motor wires.
So video signal as much as you can away from your motor wires, speed controller, all of that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
and if you do have to do that, then you want to be using a coaxial cable, a shielded cable. So like an Ethernet cable is fine, that kind of thing to try and mitigate interference.
So what I typically do is I'll run the VTX on one side of the plane, or the antenna is on one wing and the receiver and the GPS is on the other wing.
Yeah, that's about as good as you can get, really. I wouldn't like to recommend it explicitly, but Rag the Nuts Off, he used a diamond approach, so where you have video transmitter on one wing, receiver on one wing, motor at the back, and GPS at the front. Obviously, that doesn't work for all planes, but that's a good guide to go from if you like.
Okay, fantastic. Mark, you had a question?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I just have looked at my AR ring, and the AR ring is also a very special. You spoke about cable length of the camera and all that stuff. So you have the camera here in the front, and then you have to go with the cable routing all the way back to the flight controller if you use the OSD. So you have already a pretty long cable here, about 20 centimeters or so. And then in my case, the cable even goes back into the servo channel. And then over here to the VTX in the ring. So I have even the cables directly parallel to the ESC cables in the back. That might also be a big issue here.
That's about the worst thing you can do. If you really have to have them close to each other, you want them crossing over perpendicular to each other. If they're parallel, that's the perfect situation for interference.
Yeah.
Speaking of one of the things we touched on briefly, which is GPS, and that's people. I think a lot of people have an issue with the GPS as far as some of them will fire up right away, and some take 5 minutes for you to find a GPS signal. And so, is there some secrets about getting good GPS connectivity quickly?
I don't have any real tips for that from experience because I've never really had GPS issues. I don't know whether I've just been lucky or generally keeping things separated and clean has done that on its own. But yeah, again, same things as with your video transmitter. Make sure the power going to the GPS is clean, so that means having capacitors on your ESCs, having a capacitor by the GPS, keeping it separated from noisy equipment, so the ESCs, cameras, as in your HD camera, they're often quite bad for the GPS, which is pretty well isolated to the GPS, so I understand. It's not so, the camera isn't so bad for the receiver, or the video. Yeah, those kinds of things.
That's very true with split type cameras. So I remember someone doing a video of Vatasia, and all the time the Vatasia was switched on, they couldn't get GPS at all until they turned that off, got a lock, switched it back on, and it was fine. But another thing, make sure it's up the right way. So the antenna pointing up.
Yeah, yeah, that would definitely help. If you don't have it up the right way, you won't be getting much reception.
So Mark has some ideas as far as GPS too.
Yeah, I also thought about that video with the Tarsier, and I think also the RunCam split can sometimes be pretty nasty. I think it's batch depending. Some batches are really bad in causing RF noise and interfering with the GPS, and some are better. So, but I'm not sure right now how to fix that, especially because in one case, I know the GPS was in the back of the plane and the Tarsier was in the front of the plane, so it was pretty as far spread it as possible, but still caused issues. So as soon as the GPS has the log, so all the satellite information are collected, then the signal quality doesn't need to be that high anymore, so it will keep the fix. But at the beginning, sometimes it can cause really trouble, yeah.
So Mark had a really good video he put out a couple weeks ago about how to get better, quicker reception, and it's using GLONASS, the Russian satellites, for their version of GPS.
Yeah, actually, the reception quality doesn't get better, of course, but if you have a bad reception quality, so you only get satellites that are straight above you and not satellites that are flat on the horizon, then of course you will get more satellites and you will get a faster fix this way.
Yeah, that was for enabling Galileo, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
fantastic. Yeah. Okay.
But sorry, just a quick point is, if you have got a noisy device, you could use potentially something like aluminium tape to create a shield for it. Is that thoughts on that, Luke?
Yeah, aluminium tape or copper tape. Quite a lot of devices, like a good example I can think of is the original Mobius that had copper tape on the inside of its case to limit its RF output, and that's a really, really effective method of killing RF output. It's a little bit more work than some of the other methods, but yeah, very good.
Cool. Fantastic. So last time we spoke, you were talking about propellers, and hey, this is gonna be a fun one right now, because you know what? Unbeknownst to you, I asked both you and Mark which propellers you like, and there's a little bit of a disagreement. So Luke, what is your favorite? What do you like as far as propellers?
As far as propellers, generally I default to using APC propellers, and would recommend for anyone who's not sure what to go with an APC propeller. They have a whole host of performance data on their website linking to every propeller. So for every airspeed, you can get the thrust, the required power, the RPM for that propeller, and pages upon pages of data, anything you could want, and they're very well classified. So if you're buying a 7x6 prop, it will be 7 inches, which most propellers get right, but it will also have a 6-inch pitch, which is quite important, that particularly quad props don't get right at all.
So you're talking about the genuine APC propellers, not the GemFan knockoff versions.
I mean, obviously, if you want to save money and go with the GemFan ones, there may be an argument for doing that, but I think most of the time using a GemFan one kind of gets rid of the advantage of using an APC prop.
Now, to come to my argument here, what advantage beside heavy vibrations on your plane and jello overall? So don't get me wrong, I have some genuine APC props here that are just newly arrived props. I have an 10x5 and 10x6 for the mini Talon I want to test, and then an 8x6 slow flight, so really light one for my long range AR ring. and also an 8x6E I wanted to try on my high-speed AR ring. To be honest, I tried a few of these on the mini Talon, and I thought the motor is damaged. I really thought the motor is bent.
But
because
the only problem is that sounds like you're not balancing them then.
If I buy a good propeller, I don't need to balance it, to be honest. So I put the propeller on the plane, and everything was vibrating like hell. And then, just out of curiosity, I took the 8x5 propeller from my Talon GT, put it on the mini Talon, and it was smooth like butter.
Yeah, I maybe that's true. I just always balance my props before I use them, so I don't know. I wouldn't even try flying a prop before I balanced it.
Yeah, I bought a balancer from Hobby King a year ago or so, but then I realized that the balancer is unbalanced, so it doesn't really.
That's not ideal.
It doesn't really help. But to be honest, if I buy propellers, the first ones I'm looking for is Gamefan, because I have a few Gamefan props, 7x6 mostly. I had on my AR ring before, and they are just fantastic. So very little vibrations only, out of stock, never needed to balance them. They are absolutely fine in my opinion. So I for myself would never again buy APC props.
In that case, if them coming pre-balanced is important to you, then yeah, definitely. I guess don't get APC props or get Gemfan props if they're better balanced out of the factory. Yeah.
So how do you balance props? Do you make tape on them, or do you grind them down to get the balance right?
Well, it depends. If I'm just doing it temporarily, so I'm not sure the balance is going to be good, because I always static balance and then I dynamically balance. So first I'll do it with tape to test it. Then I'll put it on the motor, make sure that it's good. And then if it is good, I'll sand down one side and add CA to the other side, just at whatever ratio feels right, if you like.
Yeah. So what I realized with the last batch propellers I brought, that is with the 10 by 5 and 10 by 6, the propeller adapters they are delivered with them to fit on my motor mount, they were just too small. So they were wiggling inside the propeller hole.
Oh, yeah, that would be bad, yeah.
Yeah, so it was impossible to get the propeller on straight. So even if it's balanced on the tips, it was still not centered on the propeller hub, and it was still vibrating. So at the end, I really, with this one at least, I 3D printed my own propeller adapter, and that worked pretty well, so I can at least use that prop. But yeah, it's really a lot of work. And by the way, this, I'm not sure if you see that on the camera with the light. You see that little cuts at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah. All 4 propellers came this way out of the factory.
Yeah, it didn't look too bad, but I think that was more the camera than yeah.
So that's a good question.
I could see some sort of lines, but I couldn't really see exactly what it was.
It's a chip at the top.
No, here at the end, and at the end edge of the propeller. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't focus right now.
Yeah, so not great.
Yeah, that's why I'm really done with APC right now, and I have still more propellers in my drawer here, and yeah, they're all the same.
Yeah, that's certainly not great, is it?
So the question that I have is that people are occasionally will write into the group, and they'll barely chip one of their propellers, so they'll lose like the last 5% of the end of the tip, and they'll ask here we go, Mark showing a photo. Mark, say something so we can show this.
Some people are in the asking the chat APC or APC style, but as you can see, these are genuine original APC propellers.
Okay. Yeah, so we're talking about, to be clear, there's the genuine APC propellers, was what Luke is talking about, and Mark's talking about as well. And then there's the Gemfan, which are the Chinese knockoffs of the APC propellers you get at Banggood. And so what Mark is saying is that the Chinese knockoffs are better than the ones from APC.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, so That's
The issue I have with that though.
okay. Go ahead.
I'm the opposite to Mark. I get an APC out out the packet, put it on my balancer, and it's balanced. So mine's completely the opposite to Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I
find mine balanced out the packet.
I certainly find that as well. Like,
thrust isn't as good on the gem fans. On the APC, you get excellent thrust, and on the copies that I've used, it's underpowered compared to the genuines. Sorry, Luke.
No, sorry. I thought you were stopping, but yeah, I find the same thing as well. I mean, although I balance them whenever I get them, they're rarely any significant amount out of balance, like tiny amounts. So it's more just a case of like I put them on the balancer, so now I might as well balance them. It's not like they're a mile out and they'll shake the plane to pieces if not. Certainly it's nothing I've ever really worried about. Yeah, and I've had the same thing with not just APC rip-off propellers, but other propellers in general. If they don't have the composite in them, the glass composite inside the plastic, often they're flexible, and then that leads to wash out at the tips, and you don't get the amount of thrust you would normally get. And not just that, but then you can't characterize a prop so well, so you don't actually know what it's doing in the air, and it can often lead to things like vibration and yeah.
Hey, there's Mark. Mark, say something. You gotta see this.
Yeah, this was delivered together with the Talon mini Talon I got to set up and tune because, yeah, it was, by the way, also vibrating like hell before it broke, and then the mini Talon had a harsh landing, and yeah, that was the result.
Yeah, that is the only thing about the APC props compared to the non-glass reinforced props. They will break easier because when you put the glass reinforcement in them, they become a lot stiffer. Which is good for flying, but not so good for crashing. But I generally try to optimize for flying, not crashing, even if maybe optimizing for crashing would do me some good.
So the question I was going to ask you, Luke, is that we get members in the group who, I mean, that's kind of an extreme example what Mark was showing with the broken propeller, but we get people who will chip off like on the very edge. They'll get a little chip on the very edge of the propeller, and they'll ask if they have to throw it away.
Well, there's like,
them?
Yeah, you can definitely cut them down. Like, I'll constantly be cutting down propellers for performance advantage, and just because I've taken a chip off of them. If you take a chip off, you just cut down the other side, rebalance it, and go fly it again. You can keep on doing that all the way until you don't have enough thrust to take off if you want to. And yeah, in fact, one of my Visionaires, which is a 3D plane, it's got a 12x6 prop on it, but it's now probably only about 9 inches because I always get too adventurous and take chips off the end of the prop, and I just cut them down a bit. But that's obviously a plane I'm not so bothered about how well it performs. So yeah, you have to trade off with your how much you want to spend and be constantly replacing props for that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but in terms of,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
In terms of vibrations, I wouldn't really recommend flying again with a chipped prop, but obviously it depends how big the chip is, I guess. If it's not too big, then and it's not vibrating too much, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So what about sharpening a propeller? Have you ever done that before to try to get it to cut through the air a little better?
No, if you do that, you're going to make it worse. I mean, maybe potentially if you really know what you're doing, you could get it better than APC can, but no. I'd hesitate to say you can't.
Okay, so I think one of the advantages of the APC knockoff from Banggood, and what I'm looking at right now in the United States is we might actually have a tariff war starting here pretty soon with China, which means that all this stuff is going to be a lot more expensive for Americans. But these APC propellers are only a couple bucks each. So if you break one, you can, these are the APC knockoffs, the gem fans. You can buy, when you buy them, don't buy one, buy 3 or 5. And the only thing I'll say is, like, sometimes these things get old. So if you have something and it sits around for years and years and years, it can actually fall apart in the air. I've seen it before. Yeah.
I've never had one fall apart in the air, but maybe, yeah, certainly some plastics do get brittle over time, so there's no reason why that couldn't happen.
I've seen some props get quite bad. The Durafly Excalibur, they come with, I think it's Aerostar, which I think is Hobby King's own make, or a cheap carbon fiber folding prop. And I've seen about 2 or 3 of those actually break apart at the hub.
Oh yeah,
it's a
plastic
folding
hubs
prop.
are terrible. I've
Oh, no,
had
no, it's
loads
not the
of
hub that's breaking, it's the actual carbon prop.
Oh, the carbon prop at the hub.
Yeah, it's,
oh,
it's
really?
a folding prop, and where the pin goes through, it is breaking at that hub point.
Oh, wow.
So it can happen. No, I mean, carbon fiber, you wouldn't expect it, but
No.
I'm not sure if JB Copter is still around. He was there in the chat before. He has made his big drag, I think, with a very expensive prop that has even an RPM rating on it. And during the maiden on a high throttle pass, the prop just exploded, and the propeller blades shot through the fins of the plane and even damaged the ring slightly.
Oh.
It went completely.
Unfortunately, I've had that happen quite a lot of times as well.
Yeah, you know these plates, these hollow plates on the mini drag. They are normally there.
Yeah, coroplasts.
Yeah, these
Yeah.
coroplast
Correct,
plates,
yeah.
and it completely smashed through them on both sides and made
Did he manage
holes
to
in there.
land?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You gotta say something, Darren.
Oh, sorry.
No, he's in the stream. It's okay.
Yeah, this mini drag, this one, but obviously the bigger version.
Fantastic. So propellers are a personal thing. Now, the one thing that I tend to like are the ones that both these guys hate, which are the master air screws. And so
Yeah, no. Never used master air screws, no.
I've got one right there.
I have
On
quite
my
a few because I've
trainer.
tested them, but
I
Yeah.
found it better than what came stock with it, but I did have to balance it quite a lot.
yeah, I found with master air screws they're much less efficient than APC props and most other props because they're not properly blended from the inside of the prop to the outside of the prop. I find, and they're less durable because they're too stiff, and they're not well balanced. But I guess if you've had different experience with them, then
yeah, propellers are a personal thing, and it's just one of those things that once you find something you like, you tend to stick with it. So one thing I wanted to get onto now was to ask you about, and we talked about this a little bit, which are the speed controllers. There's like a lot of guys like myself who came out of line of sight, and we're familiar with the Turnigy plush speed controllers, those orange thingies that have the BEC built on them. And so that's what we kind of grew up working with and knowing that they worked well. But now we've got these new things called BL Heli, which are, the quad guys are laughing because that's all they know. All of a sudden, this is a whole new world as far as speed controllers. They're cheap, they're small, they're incredible. But there's a lot of misinformation going around, even in the group, as to how to work with these things. So tell us what you know about the BL Heli speed, and do you prefer them over the older style linear speed controllers like the Turnigy Plush?
well, I started flying line of sight as well, but I never really had plush speed controllers, but I used loads of other various speed controllers with Bex included. But as soon as the very first BL Heli 16 ESCs came out, I absolutely loved them. The amount of programmability they had, and this was back in, I think it was, well, I even used the Simon K ESCs first, and that was 2016, something like that, maybe a bit earlier even. And yeah, the only thing is you have to put your own BEC in, but I generally like to do that anyway. So for me, there's no disadvantage and lots of advantages with them.
Okay, so you like them. One question people tend to ask in the group, or they insist, is that somebody about a year ago said that these little BL Heli speed controllers are they need a lot of airflow, and if you don't have a lot of airflow, they get hot and they can get damaged.
Well, That's quite a complex question. They do typically use higher quality Fets than other cheap ESCs. If you go for really high-end ESCs like hacker ESCs, which are made for fixed wing, then they'll have similar quality Fets and they'll heat up just as little. But certainly, the biggest problem with the BL Heli ESCs generally is that they have a very low heat capacity because they're very small. So although they can handle that current, they can either only handle it for a short period of time or they need lots of cooling. But the easy way to get around that is just to use one that's rated for double the current you need, and then you don't have to worry about it. And it's still a lot smaller than an equivalent plain ESC. Yeah, Mark?
Yeah, that's also what I always do. So if I put a quad ESC, and basically all the BA Heli are quad ESCs, into a plane, I either make it double the current capacity from what I need, or I do it like on this setup that's also recommended in the guide, and just put it on the outside of the fuselage directly in front of the propeller, like here, so it will get the full airstream. And this ESC, for example, is rated for a 65 amp continuous current and 80 amp peak. So that should be totally safe. On 6S it gets slightly warm, but it's totally fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you just have to be a little bit more conservative with them. So like with my long range plane, this can draw about 60 amps, but in general it only draws 5 amps. So that's 2.5 amps per ESC. So I just have two, I think they're fly color 35 amp ESCs, but generally I'd recommend Teco 32, 35 amp ESCs,
yeah.
And they're more than enough for the short bursts I'll get of more current. And they're really great. It means I can have reverse thrust for steep descent, so I don't overspeed the airframe, really high switching frequency, loads of advantages. Telemetry, that's a really big one for RPM particularly.
Wow, reverse thrust. We got to figure out how to do that. That sounds really cool.
Oh yeah, all of my planes have reverse thrust. I have very few planes left without BL Heli 32 ESCs, and all of the ones with BL Heli 32 ESCs have reverse thrust. It's amazing.
It's a good topic. How do you actually use that? I mean, I would be scared to immediately stall my plane.
Yeah, it certainly, you have to know what you're doing. If you use it without intention, you will screw up quite a lot. Particularly, like I say, with the long range plane in a steep descent, because it's got so little drag, if you come down any more than 30 degrees or so, you'll pick up to like 100, 120 miles an hour, which that plane just isn't designed for.
Yeah.
So you really need a way to slow it down. And what I have on it is flaps, which they're massive flaps, but at really high speed, they actually get blown back up because they're only using 5-gram servos. So at that point, it's nice to just be able to have the reverse thrust as like a backup to make sure that everything's going to be okay. And on landing, if you think you're going to overshoot, you can just get low to the ground, put it into full reverse, and know that it's just going to drop on the floor. Yeah, various things like that. I mean, with my 3D planes, it's great for doing aerobatics. You can actually, with a 3D plane, you can hover right way up and torque roll and stuff. But when you've got reverse thrust, you can do it facing downwards. It just adds a lot more versatility.
Yeah, today I would have needed a reverse thrust, to be honest, because of the high wind. I was only able to land in one direction, and directly into the wind. So behind me there was a big wall of trees. So I needed to come in very hot from down the trees and then land. So it was still pretty fast. I had to walk about 50 meters through 1 meter high grass to get the plane back.
So do you have the reverse thrust on a switch in order to change the motor direction?
I don't have my transmitter here. If it would make it better, I can go and get it, but I think I can probably explain it without. I have both of my sticks sprung to the center, so I don't have a normal throttle channel. And I've had that ever since like 5-10 years ago. well, yeah, 10 years ago, because I drive RC cars as well, where you want to have a reverse and like a braking force. So I have my zero throttle for all of my planes, either the ones without reverse thrust in the middle, and that just means I push downwards on the stick to go into reverse.
Fantastic. One question I was going to ask you, and I guess you kind of answered it. There's the BL Heli 16 and BL Heli 32. And obviously, we talked before, and you said you like the BL Heli 32 much more than the 16. So I was going to ask you about that, and also about protocols you use for the BL Heli 32.
Yeah, so like I said, I started off with Simon K. I only used a few Simon K ESCs, mostly because it was quite hard to flash them. You had to have an AVR tool or whatever, and it was just a nuisance. Then you had BL Heli 16, or just BL Heli, then BL Heli S, and now BL Heli 32. BL Heli 32 is definitely best, mostly because the ESCs that are built around it are newer, with newer Fets, better designed in general. You also get quite often a current sensor, which is quite nice. You get telemetry, D-Shot. I don't know if I didn't use D-Shot back when BL Heli S was around, but yeah, lots of new features.
Mark, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Speaking of current sensor, did you ever check back with some BA Heli 32 ESCs how precise that current sensor is?
I'm only actually using the current sensor on 2 planes. One being my speed plane, because I'm using F411 wing in that, and obviously that can't handle 8S or 90 amps or whatever. So I have to use the current sensor in the ESC for that. I haven't done any good calibration with it, just because they only have a current gain adjustment. They don't have a current offset adjustment, which isn't ideal, but certainly it's much better than not having any current at all.
Yeah, because what I am asking is, on my long-range AR ring, I have a BA Heli 32 in there, and because I'm using lithium-ion packs in there, 3S 121-700 cells, they are limited to 15 amps continuous current. So, but with 3S and the prop I used, it would pull 22 or 23 amps on full throttle. So I decided to use the current limiting in the ESC, actually, to limit the throttle just at the top end. And what I then realized is that I have set the current limit to 15 amps, but actually the flight controller was still measuring 19 amps, so it was pretty far off. So at the end, I had to set, I think, 12 or 11.5 or 12 amps in the ESC to actually hit the 15 amp limit. So at least in this DYS ESC, the current sensor seems to be off pretty much.
So is that the DYS Aria 80 amp?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's a terrible ESC. I've had 2 of them, and as you can tell by the fact that as soon as you said DYS, I knew exactly what was going on. Yeah. I've had 2 of them, and I've had nothing but troubles with both of them, and lots of other people have had the same experience. I'm using the Teco 3265 amp in my speed plane, and certainly if the current's off, it's off by no more than an amp or 2. So.
Yeah, I have the same ESC on my high-speed AR ring, so that's absolutely fine. I never cared about the current limiting, because I was just looking at the flight controller, what it pulls, and then decided what propeller I use for it to not overload the motor. But the DYS, I think I had it before on this plane. Even Glenn had it on his AR ring, and on my long-range AR ring, it's since a long time now. But it was always working very fine, so never had any issues with them.
Yeah, I mean, when I say issues, obviously that's a very wide term, if you like. Typically, you have a lot more video noise. They're very noisy ESCs. They have very bad filtration on them. They're much more susceptible to desyncs. I personally haven't had that problem, but I've heard other people with that problem.
Okay.
Things like the current sensor being out. Yeah, just general things. They're not a great ESC. If you want to use a DYS Aria, the only reason I'd really see to use that anyway would be because you need the 80 amp capability. then go to the iFlight Success ATM. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's worth every penny, in my opinion, at least.
Maybe it's like the opposite to the APC propeller. In this case, I was lucky.
Maybe that is exactly it. It's a lot of this comes down to how lucky you are with the Banggood lottery. So I guess so.
So one thing I wanted to show is, I'm glad Darren's back so I can show this. I don't know if you can see this. So you might be familiar with it. It's hooked up to a battery right now. It's a little, you buy these, they're nice and inexpensive at Banggood and other places as well. And it's a voltage. You use it to measure the battery voltage. And then what you do is you plug this side into where your battery should go in your plane, and you can measure your current with it. And that leads us into something that you and Darren have been working on, which is a nice little thing on Darren's website. Hopefully he'll share with us. Oh, you said Mark is showing.
I don't have a nice one to show, but I do have one. Yeah,
everyone has one. Okay, listen, if you're in this hobby, you need this. Okay?
Actually, I do have one to hand that I can show.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got this turned up earlier this week.
It's on my wish list. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty decent.
This is
nice
my one.
And solid. I've got a video coming out soon, so check my channel out. Plug.
So speaking of that, can you show us, and turn on your screen and show us that on your website what you and Luke worked on, and walk us through that, because this is perfect to the topic we have right now. I'm watching Darren.
Yeah.
There we go.
It's almost like we were perfectly led to it.
Almost. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, pretty much all the credit's got to go to Luke. He had all the calculations.
Well, I mean, I had the calculations, but you've done the great write-up and the website and stuff. I wouldn't even know where to start about describing it all.
So yeah, it's basically a tool for calibrating your current sensor on INAV. So you'll start with whatever scale you've got. So I don't know, 260. I don't know what an average scale is. And then,
so the scale, as you said before, is in the it's on their website for like Maytech. They'll give you a scale. You have to go search for it, but the information's there.
Yeah, it's to be honest, if you've got something like an F405 wing or something like that, when you do flash the firmware, it will fill the correct scale in for you anyway. But if not, the Maytech website's really good. Others, like someone was asking about the F35 the other week. That's nowhere to be found, that information. So yeah, so you get your current sensor scale, and the important thing is you need to remove, if there's any offset, you need to remove that before you start this tool. And you can do it with 2 readings, or you can add as many readings as you want. The more you add, in effect, the more accurate it will be. Because the part that Luke explained to me was this is based on what's called the line of best fit. So the more readings you have, the more accurate it can get that line to give you the correct current sensor scale, but also the correct offset for your flight controller. I will be doing a video on my channel about this and actually go through how to set it up using one of my planes with the watt meter. So that will all.
What you're basically doing is you're taking and hooking it up your flight controller, or the way I do it is I hook up the flight controller or on the plane to the computer, and then I will be able to read right off the INAV configurator what the voltage is, and then what you do is you look at the nice little device that we all have now and see what that reads as well, and you put those 2 in, and then what you're saying is to turn up the speed and put another value in. So do it again and again and again. The more times you do it, the more different speeds you do it, the more accurate this is going to be, right?
Yes. So you'll put the reading that comes out in INAV, and I recommend do it on the outputs tab, because then you can control the motor, and it also gives you the amp reading on the outputs tab, the outputs page. So you'd put the reading from INAV in this side, the reading from the power meter in this side, and then so I'd just put some dummy numbers in. I put so many fields in.
So while you are doing this, just a little additional information. This pass-through current meter that Steve showed before and I also have here sometimes struggle with noisy ESCs. So what I realized that sometimes on some ESCs, if I try to measure the current, especially on higher currents like 10, 20 amps, it really jumps around all over the place with the current sensing. So in this case, I also need to use a clamp current meter that's more smoothing out the actual measurement.
Yeah, I found that one with my mini AR wing on INAV. I've only tried that with a multimeter at the moment, but the multimeter was fine, but on INAV it was jumping about. So I'll definitely be following that tip and putting the capacitor on the ESC.
Yeah, definitely using a capacitor to smooth it out is a good idea. And also, it's worth mentioning that if you're doing a calibration for a flight controller current sensor, you really want to use something that's well calibrated to do it. So obviously, if you trust your power meter, that's good. I personally like to use a clamp meter for doing my calibration, but also multimeter or... Yeah,
I have the exact same clamp meter like you have, and as said before, it shows exactly the same values like this this pass-through current meter. That's totally fine, but this one is really sensitive to noise. That's why I also have added a capacitor here at one end to filter it out a little bit. But sometimes on some ESCs, I just can't use that one.
Yeah. I really like my clamp meter, mainly just for ease. I used to use my multimeter and have a inline adapter and stuff, but this is so nice just being able to clamp it onto anywhere. I even use it for like my computer, seeing how much power different components use for power limits and stuff. It's great.
And for the chat, very important, buy one that supports DC current, not only AC.
Yes.
A friend of mine bought the wrong one and it has only AC support. So you needed to order another one.
Yeah, exactly. And ideally get one with different ranges. So like my one before this that I've had for 10 years or so, it only had one range and it was a 200 amp range, which is fine, but then you only get down to 1 amp accuracy all the time. Whereas the one I have now is a Unity UT210E, and it has a 2 amp range, a 20 amp range, and a 100 amp range. So you can get down to 2 decimal places of accuracy on your current.
And the reason why we're going over this is so that when you're out flying and you know, if you don't do this, sometimes you get back and you'll see like your cell has 3.6 volts left on it on average, and then you go home and you plug it in, you'll see like it really had 3.7, so I'm off by 1/10 of a volt, and you know I could have been out for a couple more minutes or flying, or maybe you have 3.5 and like, oh my god, this is horrible. Any longer and I would have crashed the plane. So you want to get the reading as accurate as possible, and this is a tool to help you do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially with longer range stuff, like you can get exactly how much capacity of a battery you've used, and it's for long range it's definitely a lot more important. And I believe it actually enables more features, doesn't it, Mark? If you've got a well set current sensor, you can do more with INAV as well.
Yes, exactly. There are some values you need to set up through the CAI configuration. That's cruise power, idle power, and one more, cruise speed. And then INAV can actually calculate and show in the OSD your remaining flight time and your remaining flight distance till you have to turn around to reach home safely. So it actually shows you your play time and play distance before you have to turn around. One funny story, you remember that I had so much trouble to set up my current sensor on the Dart 150G, and it was jumping all over the place during the flight. I have now finally finished to calibrate it correctly, so now that's working with the capacitor and all that stuff, but it's still jumping around. What I didn't think of is that the servos actually use so much current compared to the low motor current that I see it actually when it balances in my current sensor.
Right.
That's actually a really good example of a problem I had with this plane. This is my under 250 gram long range plane. It actually weighs 190 grams. But even just having the stabilization on, so being in acro mode rather than in manual mode in INAV, will use up to 10% more power just constantly moving the servos. If I change it to manual mode, I get 10% more efficiency. It's it's crazy.
That's why I've also put the automatic VTX power switching depending on the distance, because
definitely.
I mean, if you see, the VTX alone pulls about 650 milliamps on 2S, and the motor or the overall current is 1.8 amps. So the VTX alone pulls a third of the current of the whole plane.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much this VTX draws. It's only a 600 milliwatt VTX, but I could quite happily believe it pulls about that. I think my standby current is about 1.2 amps with this plane, and the cruise current is 2.4 amps or something. So literally half the power draw is the receiver, the VTX, the camera, and the servos.
But that's a really high standby current. If my VTX is at full power, my 250G pulls at around 0.7, 0.8 amps.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is
with
quite
600
high,
milliwatt.
Don't know. I might have to look into that then. It didn't surprise me particularly, but yeah, it might even just be that it's not perfectly calibrated, although I did do the current calibration on that, so I doubt that's the problem.
Okay, Darren, let's go back to your website.
Yeah, we can just finish this off. I do remember, actually, you don't need to, if you put extra boxes in you don't actually need to fill them in. It will. So all we need to do is calculate, and it will give you the new sensor and the offset. And it also has the milliamp offset if you want to use it with beta flight, that sort of thing. So this is for INAV here. So yeah, it's a nice simple tool that will get you a lot more accurate than the stock current sensor.
Fantastic. It's a beautiful tool. It's really helpful. It doesn't take very long to work with this either. Once you just get it set up, you can 5 minutes, you got it down.
No, it's just plugging in numbers, that's all.
Yeah, and obviously it is worth pointing out that this isn't required to fly an INAV plane. This is if you're worried about doing it because it's just another thing to add to the list before you have to go flying. It's not essential, but it's very nice for if you want to start, particularly doing long range and that kind of thing. It's invaluable.
It's kind of an important point, right, to bring up, which is the group is really, we're focused on, I think, 2 areas right now. The first one is, how do we get people to the first 30% of the way through INAV? How do you get people to get a plane up in the air and at least get it flying so it doesn't crash? And then be able to do auto tune and auto trim and all these other things. And but the other part of the group is we got members that have been flying INAV for years. And what do you do with the last 15% of INAV? How do you get your planes even smoother? And then getting the most possible out of INAV. And this is absolutely one tool that we can work with. And then the Mark's Masterclass Tuning Guide is definitely another tool. Looking through that, there's just so many tools in there so you can really get the plane flying beautifully. But it's a bit complicated, so we're going to be working on that. And as far as the group's concerned, or the website is concerned, and to make sure that everybody knows, feels more comfortable doing those advanced calculations and about advanced setups. So, okay, so we've talked about everything else. When it comes to flight controllers, is there anything that stands out in your mind, Luke, as something that's fantastic as far as flight controllers are concerned?
I mean, in terms of fantastic, I think it'd have to be the Maytech F765 wing. I have one of them in my long-range plane. It's great. That's all I've really got to say about it. It can do everything you want and more. The one I use the most is the F411 wing because it's really small. You can make it even smaller by desoldering the inductors and stuff. If you don't need the BCs just to get it even lighter. Yeah.
It's the F411 WSE from Maytech. Is the
No, not the WSE. I'm not such a big fan of the WSE. The Wing is the the one I prefer.
Oh, okay. Have you ever worked with the? So there's a couple different versions of it. It's the you have the F405 standard and the F722 standard. Those are two really flight controllers that were built for quadcopters or multi-rotors, and then. But they came out with something called the Pdb Wing /W of that. So what you do is using the F-chub connector, you can hook those up to something that makes it almost like an F405, F722 wing.
I've never used them, but I don't see any reason why it'd be any worse than the F405 wing or F722 wing. Yeah.
So the 765, that's their Maytech's like the higher end. That's the super, high-end version. It's designed for someone who's pushing a lot of servos and a lot of power.
Yeah, the main thing advantage of the S765 is ArduPilot compatibility. So obviously that's not necessarily for discussion in this video or in this podcast, but
right.
So if you want to be able to experiment with ArduPilot, as I do with the long-range plane, and if you want more UARTs, it's very useful. I think I have 9 UARTs on that plane, so yeah, having the extra UARTs in the F765 is really good. Yeah, other than that, you can generally stick to the F405 or the S722 or even the F411 wing. It's what I have in 4 or 5 of my INAV planes. It's more than enough for almost everything.
So one thing we should mention also, when it comes to these Maytech line of products, is that there are a lot of knockoffs, and sometimes they're not very honest about that these are knockoffs. So everything you buy from AliExpress that is Maytech is a knockoff. So they have knockoff of every single flight controller that Maytech makes. And the reason I bring that up is we actually had a member who was in the group when we first started, and he was really passionate about the group, and he was flying was the Thin Wing Saber, and he has an F405 wing flight controller, and he brings it in and coming into a landing, and all of a sudden he said he lost all control. He lost control of he couldn't work the plane at all. He lost his camera, everything. And what it turned out was, I tracked it back. He actually bought a knockoff, and they had a linear, as far as the ESCs were concerned, it was a linear ESC, not ESC, but the BEC. So the battery elimination circuit is linear as opposed to being switching. And because of that, what ended up happening was that when he was coming in for a landing, he's using all his servos, which are big servos, at the same time, and it killed the 5-volt regulator on this F405 wing. And because of that, he lost about a $400 plane. So, and I know it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, you save a few dollars. I mean, literally, it's usually just a few dollars. But I swear to God, there's a difference between the ones that are Maytech and the ones that aren't. And if you are at all concerned if they're getting the genuine Maytech product, you can always look up on their website. They have a list of distributors. And you can also, Samsung gals in the group, you can send them a message and ask them if this is legitimate or not. And I've done that from time to time, asking, if a supplier in the United States is a legitimate supplier.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to like the same thing as I was talking about earlier with the Panasonic capacitors. A lot of times you won't have any problem with the Chinese ones, but if you're putting it into a big investment, like my long range plane, it's £800 or something. I don't want it going down because I saved £2 on capacitor. There's not really much point in that. So it all depends where you sit with it, and yeah.
Yeah, as far as the knockoffs are concerned, the only ones I'll use are like the knockoff F4, the Omnibus F4 V3. Those are, cheap as chips. It's not a really great flight controller, but it's okay. It does have an F405 STM inside of there, so it's decent as far as processing power. But the thing is, for a crap build, it's a great one, but you gotta load that thing up with capacitors, because if you don't, the thing will die really quickly.
So Omnibus, the famous plane killer.
I've never actually used one as a flight controller. I've only used them for OSDs, but even just using them as an OSD, they're pretty sketchy.
Yeah.
I actually have one in the long range plane because I have a backup OSD with the backup camera and the backup video transmitter. And even then, it's like so glitchy and stuff. I'm going to replace that with an F4 one soon. So
yeah, I've seen recently a video from someone who built a really cheap scrap build plane too, and put in was flying it. It was completely messed with the configuration, so it was flying really bad. But also the OSD was flickering in and out all the time, and sometimes it disappeared for a few seconds, and it was there again. And at the end, he also had an omnibus flight controller in there.
Those were recommended on INAV fixed wing group. On the INAV group itself. When you look on their page, in the GitHub page, they had the omnibus. And they were there. I think they're still up to this day. A couple omnibus flight controllers that are the better ones, not the clones. But even so, it's just kind of, I don't know. There's so many better flight controllers. I like Maytech. Not really had major problems with Maytech, but there's people like the Furious F-35s, and we also have the Brain FPVs. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started getting into FPV, the omnibus, even the clones, were what were recommended, but we didn't really have the Maytech. That was the thing. It was like, this is what we've got, so this is what we'll use. I think it was like the version 2 omnibus F4V2 Pros. I think that was about the time.
That was probably about the same time that I started using INAV with the omnibus F2, F3, and whatever. But to be honest, I never trusted it, which is why I never actually started with INAV until quite a bit later as a flight controller. I only ever used it as an OSD because I just wanted the speed, my coordinates, and that kind of thing. I didn't trust it to. Yeah. It's only once we start getting the Maytech stuff that I actually trusted it to fly the plane.
Actually, the only thing I had was an I'm not sure if you could call it a clone, but the HG LRC F4 Flame flight controller that actually used the Omnibus F4 target. The flight controller was not the best when it comes to electrical noise and such stuff, but it was a really nice build quality, and I never had any actual issues with that. It's still flying in my old freestyle quad, so I crashed the quad more often than I had to solder on the flight controller. And it was working just fine, but I barely hear good news about omnibus flight controllers, especially on planes. On quads, they seem to be pretty reliable, especially on INAV quads. A lot of people use them if they build really cheap setups with Steve's Racer Star BR motors.
I'll never live that down.
And but they still work. You have plenty of euros. They are cheap to get. I know when I started with all these FPV and INAV stuff, and I looked for flight controllers. Yeah, there's one for $20, $25. Holy cow, who buys a flight controller for $50 or $60 or euros in Germany? And today I say
me.
And today I say, you need a flight controller for Wing? Buy Maytech. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I have a second F765 Wing here. That costs 65 or whatever.
But to be honest, be honest, it's worth every buck.
Yes.
Yes, fantastic. There's that. Now motors.
Nice.
As far as we've, Luke and I had a conversation about motors, and he assured me all the motors that I thought were high end were really medium end. So
I'm not sure I was quite that harsh about it, but
no. What I said was that when I wrote the guide, I was using the Racer Star BR2212 1400 kV, and then I switched over to the Sunny Sky X2212 1400 kV, and I was saying it's the equivalent of you're like in a band and all of a sudden you're dating local girls that come to the clubs and then all of a sudden your single hits, and then you're dating supermodels. It's that much better. Life gets that much better with that motor. It's insane how much better it is.
I have to admit, I can't really compare anything to dating supermodels. But
I'm just saying, I'm speaking from experience here. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I tend to think it's probably not quite that much difference anyway.
Yeah. So, are there any motors that you're fans of? Is there any motors that you sit there and say, "Wow, this is worth the extra money"?
I don't know. I tend to find with motors, if you're just looking for performance, then it's completely mixed bag. You can get the cheapest motor ever, and it can have just as much performance as the most expensive motor you can find. If you're explicitly looking for efficiency, then and you're really looking for that last few percent, then it can often get a lot more expensive. And like I was saying to you, like typically when I think of good motors, I think of Scorpion, Hacker, NEU, all of the classic fixed wing, really good motors. But they're really expensive, like £100, £150, that kind of thing. And then the only other thing is things like bearings and durability. Typically, I don't worry about it so much, but definitely if you get a more expensive motor or a better motor, then you'll get better bearings, better durability. Recently, I've been using the Jing motors a lot, not because I have any particular affiliation with them or anything, but just because they seem to have the right motors for what I want. They had the right sizes, the right KV, that kind of thing. I've been using the Brother Hobby motors for the same reason. They seem to have, for the next version of my long range plane, I'm going to be using the 2507 1200 kV Avenger motors, just because that's the specification of motor I want, and they're pretty well the only ones that make it. So, yeah.
The way I've kind of seen the motors recently is like, I think the guys who do racing quads, those guys have really pushed the envelope as far as what they expect out of motors.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, compared to where we were 5 years ago with the average motor for a fixed wing, it's so much better. The quad motors that we get now are really pushing up to the Hacker, Scorpion, NEU motor levels of efficiency and quality. It's quite impressive.
So those are like the Brother Hobby, and those are the which brands do you like as far as?
Yeah, I mean, any of the more premium motors. I mean, if you're spending £15-20 or dollars or whatever on a motor, it's probably a good motor. At the moment, on the long range plane, I have Emax motors, the RS2207s, RS2 2207s.
Yes.
On my speed plane, I have the Jing motor, that's 2208, 2450 kV.
The Jing is the XING, right?
Yeah, XING. I presume it's pronounced Jing,
yeah.
but don't quote me on that. This is using a Brother Hobby. Yeah, this is using a Brother Hobby motor, a 1407. Yeah, generally, as long as you're getting something that's well reviewed, I don't suppose you can get too bad of a motor. But then I'm using plenty of Racer Star motors, typically online to site plate.
Yes.
Only because I don't care about them. Like if it costs £5 instead of 20 on a line of sight plane that I just want to bash about with, does it really matter? I'm gonna rip the shaft off in a week's time anyway. So
Luke, I have about 4 or 5 laying around here. Just around 1 flight hour, all have only slight bearing damages. That's what I think about Racer Star.
With a lot of my, this is one of the recent ones. This was used on a nut ball. You can look it up on RC groups or whatever if you want to see what it is. That it only had about 5 minutes of flight time. That was 3 flights. I wasn't expecting much more from it. I burned it up, pushing way too much power through it. I was pushing 800 watts through a 1306 motor. So you'd expect about that. It had great performance. It did what I wanted it to. I can't really complain. So
don't do this at home, okay? My feeling about the Racer Star motors is like, I think a lot of people go through this as well. When you first get started in this, all of a sudden you find Banggood, and all of a sudden you're ordering a new plane like every week. And the stuff starts adding up pretty quickly. And then you put a $5 motor on it, and if you still like the plane after 6 months or so, then yeah, spend the extra money, upgrade to a better Brother Hobby, Sunny Sky, whatever you feel like motor. But if it's something that's just it's a shelf queen, then you didn't waste too much money on it.
Yeah, I generally feel the same way. I mean, maybe I'd replace it a bit before 6 months. So generally,
Right.
I like to put nicer motors on everything I have more than a month or so, maybe in a few weeks. But quite a lot of planes don't last that long. So, like I say, not really my INAV planes. All of my INAV planes last quite a while, but particularly my line of sight planes and stuff. I go and crash them, and then crash them, and then yeah. So.
So that's why I also really like the Sunny Sky motors. Of course, I think every one of us likes them.
Yes.
I have
used one, but certainly I hear good things. So.
Yeah, so on my first AR ring that's completely beaten up over there in the corner, mostly consisting of glue, so it had tons of crashes, and all these crashes were with the blue Sunny Sky X2212 on it. So the motor was really misused during its lifetime, and it still runs like on day one. So no bearing issues, still the same performance. The windings are still nice and red golden, so nothing has burned up. Absolutely fantastic motor, and everything is fine. Even this X2212 Mark II, the previous one with the black housing, I also have that laying around. It flies fantastic, and the Sunny Sky motors just last forever. They are not the best performance motors, of course. You can't punish them like a T motor or so. Then they will burn up, of course, but if you treat them well, they will last forever.
So for relaxed FPV, especially for the AR wing, the blue one you're talking about is the X2212 1400 kV V3. And that one is the one I was using the analogy of dating superstars. That thing is such night and day better than anything else as far as $5 motors are concerned. So it's worth the extra $20 to buy that motor outright and start off with that one, because it is. I was looking, instead of 900 grams of thrust, you get 1500 grams of thrust on a 3S battery. All things being equal.
So what's the difference in kV or size between the two motors then?
They're essentially the same motor. They're both X22. They're 2212s.
Yeah.
They're both 1400 kV. The thing is like, for whatever reason, you get about 50% more power.
So you use the same prop on both of them?
Same prop, same motor, same propeller, 8x4. Yeah.
So you're talking between the blue and the black one?
No, I'm talking about the blue and the Racer Star.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
the race. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's a bit different. I thought you were talking about the two Sunny Sky motors.
No, I haven't really played with the black ones all that much.
The black ones, technically, they have the same specifications in size and kV, but the blue ones can handle a higher current continuously because they have a better cooling systems with the cooling openings at the bottom, and I think also the core is more massive to dissipate more heat. So the blue one overall with the same prop and the same load does not get as hot as the black one.
Fantastic. And so you were saying though, Mark, that the Air B, the T motor Air B, is one you can punish. And you put that on 6S, and that's if you want to have a speed build. That's the way.
So actually, I mean, this is, where is it written? It is actually a Racer Star motor.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's designed and quality controlled by T-Motor, and this motor, you can really punish it. I know from one guy who has burned it up on 6S with an 8-inch prop. That was too much for the motor, but I think he pulled about 80 amps or so through it. And for a 2514 motor, 80 amps continuous on a plane is really much. Really too much. And this motor is rated for 60 amp peak current for less than 10 seconds and 45 amp continuous current. And with the 8x6 prop on the AR ring, I match exactly that specification. So my peak current is about 57 amps and the continuous current is 44. And I already did full throttle runs without any issues on this motor. And with more than 180 kilometers per hour.
I've just posted to the chat a link to me pulling 800 watts through a 1306 race star motor. If you want to link that in the chat for people to watch.
Yeah, let me copy it.
And I was exaggerating a bit when I said it's had 5 minutes of flight. It's probably had about 30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. About 6 flights, 7 flights each for 5 minutes, I guess. Best £5 I've ever spent.
Totally.
If you see the performance, you'll see what I mean.
Well, if we're looking at performance, I wouldn't mind showing this. This is a company that is just starting to come into planes. They've mostly been working with quads, and this is for X-class quads. So this motor, they actually have oil cooling inside the motor to keep it cool, and they've also got different lips on to get more airflow through it. So they've completely redesigned everything from the ground up. But this motor in particular is $200, and if you put your hand out, it will just sit in the palm of your hand. It's massive. But what they have got as well is let's see if I can find them. But they have Zing motors. Sorry, I'm not on their actual website. But yeah, this Demon Seeded 22.8 motor is a quad motor, but it's got wet sump and all this. But they're producing a spec wing motor as well, which again it's got replaceable. This part here will unscrew, and you put oil in there to cool it. You get different grades of oil to cool at different speeds. They've got like a sheath that goes on the back to assist cooling through it. So they're a company to watch out for. KO Motors. It's definitely worth having a look at their stuff. Just trying to. So yeah, you can see there where you put the cooling oil. But yeah, it's something to look at in the future.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean
I have actually seen their first announcements and their first promotion videos of these motors, but as I have to say, after looking how that cooling system should work, basically it's just a hollow shaft with oil in it. So the oil is meant to transfer the heat from the coils down to the bottom and to the motor mount to dissipate more heat, but for me, it sounds a little bit like a real hype train.
There's that, but there's also the way the bell shape as well. It actually is supposed to draw heat in or draw more air in differently to how a normal motor works. Yeah. Because a lot of quad motors are just shaped for a quad effectively. Yeah. So they're used to sitting upright and pulling air, whereas the spec wing motor they're coming up with has actually got a bell on the bottom. So where the motor mount is, you screw on an aluminium plate, and it's designed to funnel the air through. And apparently I've done a lot of work on cooling.
Yes, well, that's absolutely true.
The proof is in the pudding at the end of the day.
I mean, there are also a lot of mods you can 3D print, like for the mini drag or also for the AR ring, to have actually a cooling fin to change the airflow direction onto the motor to actually cool it a little bit better. I think it's practically the same principle. It's just about this oil stuff in there where I'm a little bit skeptical if that really helps that much and if it is really worth the price at the end. I know the bell shape might be much better for cooling, especially on pusher planes. I know that quad motors, if you have a quad motor on a pusher plane, it's mainly the same principle as a quad ESC on a plane. You should only use maybe 2/3 of the rated current continuously on this motor. Otherwise,
I disagree with you there.
Yeah, you sure on a pusher plane? I mean, I had.
Oh, actually, no. I take it back. I don't fly pusher planes, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So
I just fly them till they've blown out.
Yeah, well, I've just shown. That's exactly what I do.
I mean, just take the Dart 250G. The Sunny Sky 1406 motor that's on there is rated for 15 amps from Sunny Sky. But if you put a 5-inch prop with 3S on there and run full throttle, you really risk to burn up the motor, and it's just at about 12 amps. Because it just gets too hot. It's in the shadow, in the air shadow of the fuselage, so it doesn't get enough cooling.
But no, that means something like this is nice open back, and you're supposed to be able to push these. Hang on. But it's nice and brown on the back.
What motor's that?
That's a T-Motor F80 Pro.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah, no, that was what I had on my speed plane before I had the Jing motor. I had 1.3 kilowatts going through it, so you definitely can if you're handling it right.
I did well then.
Yeah.
That's a badge of honor for you, Darren. That's...
Oh yeah. You burnt out motors.
You're a legend. So that kind of brings up an interesting topic as well. I wanted to just get across, which is we get people who join the group, and I read the write-ups. So what people say, and they're like, I fly quads, or I'm flying RC planes. I want to get into INAV, and then it's not even a half sentence later they're saying I want to fly long-range FPV. So you've obviously, what's your advice to people who want to get into long-range FPV?
Were you talking to me or Darren? Or
I'm talking to you, Luke.
Okay, yeah. My advice is definitely 100%. I really can't emphasize this more. In my opinion, don't even start with INAV. Start flying line of sight. Although I know that's a hotly debated, controversial topic. Yeah, I'm a strong believer in learn to fly line of sight well first, so become reasonably competent with line of sight. Then move over to a simple INAV build. Maybe don't even fly FPV straight away. Just put INAV on a normal line of sight build so you can get used to the controls, how to set it up, the flight modes, that kind of thing. Then put FPV on it, and maybe for your first FPV flights you take the INAV off. I'm not exactly sure what you want to do there, but maybe certainly a very simple build, a Bixler, something like that. Just keep it in very close. Do 10 hours of flying, just keeping it in close, doing simple stuff, getting the feel for it.
Manual
and
mode.
Then you can start very gradually pushing the range out. I mean, I did 5 years of flying before I started doing any proper long range. So 5 years of FPV flying, that is. So with another 10 years of line of sight flying before that.
So what you're saying, I mean, I'm shaking my head in agreement with you, because what I'm seeing is like, that's how I started off. With line of sight, you want to be able to know how to get the plane down in case your video goes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so vital knowing how to fly line of sight, and not even just for those kinds of reasons, but it teaches. Trying to learn to do it all at once is very complicated. I mean, I know that nobody's going to listen to me when I say this, but I think that everybody should start with free flight planes. So you don't even have a transmitter. You just build a plane with a wind-up motor or whatever, and you chuck it and you tune it to. That's how I started, and that's what I did for the first few years. You really learn so much about the mechanical side of building, the aerodynamics, and that kind of thing. It's so great.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point I just had with the setup of a friend. He has a binary, and he really struggled to get it in the air. And he crashed multiple times. He glued it together. It never flew, and when it flew really bad. So I just gave him some advice. Hey, change these settings for auto launch. Start with these PIF values instead of the INAV defaults. Then it flew. It flew well, but as soon as he entered loiter or return to home, it just banged and it completely stalled. So he had enough power, he had enough speed, everything was fine, but it just stalled, so he had to catch it. So I was looking at that, and I said to him, hey, do me a favor, make a short video or picture of your control surface throw in manual mode. So he sent me a picture of his elevator, And without saying too much, if this is the elevator, his control surface went this. No joke. And so
let me point out, there's nothing wrong with that, just not for an FPV plane.
Also not for a
binary.
For a binary, because
Yeah.
it just speed stores. It will just
Yeah.
speed stores. It's impossible to control that.
Yeah.
And as soon as he can fly it, of course, if he's in acro mode and it does just slight stabilization and all that stuff, everything is fine. But as soon INAV starts to do rough maneuvers, it will use the whole throw of the control surface, and the plane will just crash. So, and that's why I explained him, you really need to fly the plane in manual first and test if the actual hardware of the plane will work with the limits of the plane. You have limits in pitch rate, you have limits in roll rate, and you really need to figure that out completely manual. And only if this is in this case everything is stable, then you can enable and set up INAV completely. And then you are sure that whatever INAV does, it will not pass the limits of the actual plane.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
The thing about long-range FPV, I mean, when we have people join the group and you're excited about this, I know like a lot of times you'll see videos and somewhere else and like, I want to be able to do that as well. But that's something you work up to. And if you start off with that, the chances of you losing your plane are very high, because the further away it is, when you lose it, your chance of getting it back.
That's the thing. I've gone some pretty extreme ranges, and I've never lost a plane. While flying FPV, and it's about doing it right. You should never jump ahead. You have to do it in the right steps. You go out 1 mile further each time.
Yep.
You always have a DVR. You always make sure you're looking at your battery. Preferably have a spotter, or not even someone to spot for you in terms of looking at the plane, but just have a monitor as well, so that you can be flying the plane and they can be monitoring your battery and all of that kind of thing. The wind, it's so helpful. Being prepared is really 90% of a long range flight. It's not actually the flight, it's the preparation, having the experience.
Yeah, absolutely agree here. And also, it's very important to make sure you can completely trust your setup. So the plane might fly absolutely fine if you have a calm day. So you cruise around, you use return to home, you use 3D cruise mode. Everything can be fine. And then one day you do a long range flight, you fly 10, 15 kilometers out, and then suddenly you get in an area where there's some wind from mountains or any kind of turbulence, and then you suddenly realize that your setup cannot handle that, and it just starts to stall because it gets downwinds or some other strange things could happen. So what I usually do is, if I build a new plane and if I build a long range setup, I use calm days to tune it for efficiency, and I use a little bit windy and gusty days to tune it for stability. And only if every mode, cruise mode, return to home, position hold, everything works in every usual flight condition, then I start to go really long range. So sometimes it can take many weeks if the conditions are not right yet. And at least 5 or 10 packs flown before, and then I do my first long range trip, not sooner.
So what you guys are saying is that long range FPV is a discipline, and you have to work yourself up to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you get into these planes, you're starting to spend hundreds of dollars to get these planes put together right, and you want to get those things back.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's also Sun and Dead FPV. A lot of FPV racers do not have the patience to fly planes. Yeah, maybe that's absolutely true, because FPV racers are used to fly around obstacles and have action all the time, and then they fly planes and it's just boring cruising around.
It is. You're saying that it's boring. You get out there and you're flying for like Mark, you like send me text messages sometimes. You're out there flying for an hour, hour and a half, and there's nothing going on. You're just kind of looking at the monitor, and so that's kind of it's a different thing altogether. It looks fun and exciting. It's cool to say you've taken a plane out, 30 kilometers, but yeah, if you're doing 60 kilometers an hour, it's half hour to get it out there and a half hour to get it back.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean that's the point of long range. It's not only breaking borders and getting further away than before and really getting your gear to the limits. It's also this kind of adrenaline kick. You turn. Do you get another kilometer before you turn around, or will you lose your plane and then you come back and you see your voltage dropping and dropping and dropping, and then you start to calculate how many volts do you lose every kilometer, and does it come back? Maybe not. And I think that's real fun at flying long range.
That's another thing, right? I tend to find as soon as I first have the thought, maybe I should be turning around now, that's the time you turn around. If you certainly can go further, but that's when you start to risk your equipment. And yeah, again, it depends what kind of investment you've got in your equipment. Well,
if you decide that now's the time to turn around, you get back and you've got plenty of battery, next time you can go that bit further.
Exactly, yeah.
It's safer to do it that way around.
Exactly. It's not like it's you've wasted anything. It's a learning experience, and you can never have too many of them.
Yeah, indeed. And but there are some things you can't control, like wind conditions. Imagine you're starting at very calm conditions where your launch point is, and then how suddenly the weather can change sometimes, and then suddenly you have to fight 20 kilometer per hour headwind on the way back. Because you were flying for an hour or so, then you're getting really nervous. And what's really important on long range flight, plan your routes. Really plan it to be sure that you have some emergency landing spots on your way back.
Yeah, I mean, one of probably my scariest experiences with long range was with my long range plane. I'd been flying around for probably about an hour or so before I actually started the long-range mission, and I was flying out to sea, quite a way out and quite high up, and where I was, the wind was coming back towards me, but up high, it turned out that the wind was going the other way, and I was above the clouds, I couldn't see the ground, and I didn't have a spotter or a second person looking at the stats and stuff, and it was only about another hour into the flight before I realised that I was now going with the wind, and I was about 3 times further out than I thought I was. It becomes quite a serious problem at that point. It can really get away from you quite quickly.
Yeah, so I think what I really would like to do in the future sometime is really flying over the ocean, but then I would do that on the North Sea. Not sure if it's called that in English. Yeah, North Sea, and then, for example, fly over to one of the islands, one of the offshore islands, and just in case something happens, I can maybe crash land there on the island and can retrieve the plane later, and don't put it into the ocean.
So if you guys make it out to California, so this is a little something for you to think about, Mark. I know.
You on about flying to California? I've done some long range, so I'm not sure I can quite make that.
That would be a massive lithium ion.
Yeah, which way would I even go round? I don't know which way is the shortest way there.
We have an island right off the coast known as Catalina, and the Catalina Island is part of the United States. You have this problem in the UK, which is the next closest country is like your island, and so a lot of people want to fly across the English Channel, and then you end up in France, you're in a different airspace, and they're not too kind, think too highly of it. At least here you can kind of get away with it. So it's 22 miles from off of Los Angeles to Catalina. So there's something for you to think about, Mark.
Yeah, well, I think
that sounds like a nice little flight.
I mean, 22 miles, that's about 30 kilometers, right?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, it could, if it's a calm day, it could actually be even doable with the Dart 250G. But definitely with my AR Wing and my Talon GT. Especially with the Talon GT. It should, with lithium ion, it should have a total flight range of about 120 kilometers or so. Then it's easy done. As long as I have still video link. But I could do it with an autonomous mission and then just review the footage.
So speaking of lithium ion batteries,
oh no.
we got to end with this one.
Yeah.
So I need a replay of this, the lithium ion battery debate. So each of you get a couple minutes to describe your position on lithium ion. This is solder versus using spot welders. So Luke, go ahead, please.
My opinion is, and I will say it has changed slightly since I talked with Mark before in the after show of the last podcast. I prefer soldering lithium-ion batteries. I've been soldering them for nearly 10 years now. I mean, on my old website, I've got a photo up of a power bank that I made in 2012 from some old laptop batteries, and that was pretty shoddy. But since then, definitely I've got a lot better, and I think that the way to do it is soldering. And at one point I had a what's it called, a spot welder, and I just found it was too cumbersome to keep around, but also if you didn't use it all the time, it was quite easy to lose practice with it and potentially do a lot more harm than good. You can blow through the ends of the cells and have serious problems. You can get bad joints that seem to be okay but then just come apart all of a sudden on you. It's certainly not the perfect solution. Well, it's certainly not definitely better. I've had no real problems with soldering. But Mark, will probably have something to bring up, which I agree with to an extent may be relevant.
So before we go into Mark, I'll say that we have a new member in our group, which is Wayne Barber, and kind of a really guy has a lot of aviation experience. And I was talking with him, and he agrees with you, Luke. He says that he uses soldering iron, and he feels like if you do it right, you can get away with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You have to do it right. You have to use a high temperature soldering iron with a big tip, so you get a lot of heat capacity for a lot of heat transfer in a short period of time. You really want to be touching that lithium ion battery for as short a time as possible, 1 or 2 seconds preferably. I personally go for tinning the battery, the end of the battery, tinning the strip, and then applying a heat a second time to get it all together. But Mark has said that, or I think it was Mark said he'd prefer tinning it and connecting a strip all at once. But it depends how you feel you can do it best, quicker, and get the least heat into the battery overall, I guess.
Yeah.
So Mark.
So my point on this topic is, and yes, if I solder an lithium ion, what I really try to avoid, then I tin the nickel strip first, and then I just put some flux on the battery and then heat up the nickel strip and then just shortly push it on the battery to have it as short as possible, as you stated before. But if you think about it, the battery housing actually is just a thin sheet of metal, basically. So it's not thicker than this little cardboard, for example. And now if you would try to or let's say you take a sheet of copper plate, very thin one, 0.1 or 0.2 millimeters, or copper plate or aluminum plate, doesn't matter, and then just try to solder at a specific spot a cable or a nickel strip on there and keep your finger on the other side. I bet you will burn your finger no matter what, no matter how short you heat it up. And that's exactly the spot where the point I'm worried about, that the actual material that stores the energy and that's really heat sensitive. I think it starts to degrade at 60 degrees or so. will get heated up for a short amount of time, and then this will be a spot inside the cell where it starts to degenerate over time. It's not that you will blow up the battery, but in my opinion, this might cause faster degeneration of the cell over time.
So this is almost why we need to have somebody who can make these things for us, like commercially, who does this full time. And there was one outfit, Titan, that was around for a while that was doing this, and then they got a big contract and they're not offering the service anymore. But
I don't know. I don't think there's really any problem with soldering lithium ions on your own either way. I mean, that's the big thing that I would argue. Even if you solder them badly, realistically, how much damage are you going to do? Certainly, I know when I used to solder them, 10 years ago, I was very bad at it, and I didn't have any serious problems. I didn't notice any serious side effects. Certainly no worse than just the fact that they were already used batteries. But I do see what Mark's on about. My argument before was always that if you only put a very small amount of heat in with a soldering iron, then what difference does it make? But his point about,
you're the guy that can answer the question. Then you've done it both ways. You've done both the spot welding and you've done soldering.
Yeah.
So have you, over time, have you noticed a difference between the life of these batteries?
Not a single thing. I've never noticed any impact either way. But then I'm not saying that I would be able to, because I've never done like A/B testing for that kind of thing. I've always been, if I made one pack with a spot weld, or I made a different pack with the soldering iron, I use them for different things. So the fact that they wore down at different rates isn't really that unexpected anyway. So
Darren.
Right, so here's the kicker though, because Zod or ZOHD make lithium ion packs, and for a 4S1P lithium ion pack, it costs £40. For £20, you can buy the batteries and do it yourself. So unless it lasts half as long as that Zod pack in lifespan, then is it really worth buying the pre-production packs? But also, I found a video. We were speaking about getting a flare camera and doing a spot weld and a solder. I've actually found a video that was quite old on YouTube, but it did just that. The only problem is he soldered the cells really, really badly. He didn't use any flux. He used crap solder. So the results were a bit skewed. But what you found out is the heat of the iron, you did get in the end of the cell. It did progress into the cell a little bit more.
Just before you carry on, it's worth that we all agree that for the positive side, there's no issue at all. It's only for the negative side that there's any problem. But that's not necessarily relevant. I just thought I'd point it out before anybody started questioning it.
There's an air gap on the positive side, so it's not so much of an issue. But anyway, you do get into the cell the heat of the soldering iron, but it does, within 30 seconds, disappear pretty much back to normal temperature. So if you're using, the other thing, he was soldering at a really low temperature. It's like 300 degrees. So he was using, I think, the only thing he had going for him is he was using a spade tip. So it was too low a temperature, no flux, bad solder.
Yeah, so what I use is a TS100 with the C4 tip. So that's the
I have the same.
Tip.
Yeah.
And I use it at just whatever it'll go to. That's a boost mode of 450 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's the reason I use the TS100 rather than one of my other bigger soldering irons is because the TS100 actually has the heating element right in the tip, which means that, so you have three things going for you: the high temperature, then you have the high heat capacity of the tip, and then with the heating element being right in the end of the tip, as soon as the heat starts to drop, it can get the heat back into the tip quicker. So you maintain that higher temperature better. Those three things really make a big difference.
So what I'm seeing here is, like, I think for like the average member, we look on the map, there's a lot of guys who live near no one else, and there's no one they can hit up to get a spot weld done on a lithium ion battery. But if we can make a video, Luke, of showing how you do it, with the T100 and going through the process, I think a lot more people would be at least willing to take it on, at least under the guise of like, hey, this might be $40 you're going to spend. If it works, you're going to be really happy. If not, well, you might have to replace the cell or two.
Yeah, I mean, there are loads and loads of good videos on how to make lithium-ion packs. I mean, when I was doing it originally, I used to watch this guy called LiIon. He used to make lithium-ion packs for e-bikes. This was 10 years ago or whatever. I'm sure there are many, many better videos now than that. So it's not necessarily a lack of information. It's probably just a lack of trust in that information that I think is the biggest thing. Yeah, I think I'd be happy to recommend that people solder as long as they do it correctly.
Okay, so we can get your little formula for putting it together, and people can also recommendation as far as different batteries, because there's a lot of different cells out there.
That's another thing. I often see people asking in the group, not necessarily this group, but other Facebook groups as well, about how to orient the cells in a pack and how to connect them up. If you're having to ask that question, you're probably you're probably not at the kind of stage where you should be doing it. If you're having to ask about how to wire up a battery, you need a lot more experience before you start thinking about how to make your own.
I just recently saw a post in the FPV Racer Germany group where someone asked, hey, is it okay to put two lithium-ion packs into series if they have different capacities, because he wanted to combine the existing two lithium-ion cells he used in his Tyrannus together with two new cells that are bigger. And so really, I totally agree with you. If someone asks that kind of questions, he shouldn't try to solder or build any packs.
I mean, it kind of comes to a point where you don't want to say people shouldn't be able to do things if they're asking questions, because obviously the whole point of a group like this is for getting people's help. But even if you're having to ask about what battery to use and that kind of thing, it's so easy to read the data sheets for these batteries and find out which ones are good, which ones are bad, which one fits your application. Obviously, that's where I say there's a bit of a grey area. What's the harm in recommending a battery? But at the same time, if you're soldering these potentially very dangerous batteries, should you be able to do that yourself? I don't know. I guess that depends on the other things you see from the person and that kind of thing as to whether it's safe for them to do. I don't know where I sit on that really.
Yeah, I think also the question about should you solder or should you spot weld your batteries, I think it also depends on the use case and on the volume of batteries you want to build.
Yeah.
If you just do it like me, so if I build a long-range plane, I will build exactly one lithium-ion pack for that plane, because usually it then flies 1 hour, 1.5 hours or so. So I don't need to change it out and do another 1.5 hours flight. No, I'm done then if the plane is back. And so I don't need more than one specific pack for each plane. And in this case, I either use cells that have solder strips already welded on. So you can get these batteries with pre-welded nickel strips. So I just solder on the strips. Or I really do a solder battery for myself if I just need one. So I don't have the volume that it makes sense for me to buy a spot welder. And if I want to have a high quality pack that is welded, then I just ask someone who has one.
Yeah.
So the temperature for the spot welder on the FLIR camera was still about 200 degrees, and it was obviously pinpointed in one area. So it's still getting quite a lot of heat into the pack. So, but yeah, it's about 200. So it's probably about half the heat of the solder. But yeah, so there we have the information.
Yeah.
So you learned a lot about that. It's usually if you're doing this, then if you working on lithium-ion packs, that's a huge learning curve, and hopefully we'll have some information for people so that at least help point him. Maybe we'll have an article or two about how to get started off with lithium-ion packs and how.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point, kind of. I think another thing is people quite often jump to lithium-ion a lot before they really need to. Like with my long-range plane, I have a 5-hour flight time with lithium-ion batteries. So let's say you halve that with using LiPos instead. I can't see many people really wanting more than 2.5 hours. If you go for other optimizations, you can quite happily get more than enough with lithium polymer batteries rather than going for LiIons.
That's actually a really good
shouldn't
point.
be. I mean, yeah, I've loaded that up with LiPos and flown doing aerobatics and stuff, not doing conservative long range flying for an hour and a half. So it's not like you need to have lithium ion batteries to do long range. It's before 2017, I'd never put a lithium ion battery in a plane, and I was doing plenty of long flights and stuff. So
I mean, it's actually a good point. When I started with long range, I only had LiPos, and I just optimized my first AR ring back then to have as many as long flight time as possible, and I was able to get about 45 minutes out of 2,600 milliamp hours LiPos, and it was so many times. Sometimes I was cruising around because I hadn't the gear for big distances. Because I just had 2.4 gigahertz radio link, so I was cruising around in a radius of 3, 4, 5 kilometers around, and after 30 minutes I thought, okay, where should I go now?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And now if you look at it, they have like 20 amp batteries, LiPo batteries, which have plenty of, if you're building, that's for a big plane, that's not for something small like an AR wing, but if you're building a big plane, if you do a long range FPV, you can get a lot of value out of that. Plus, you don't have to hit up people for their spot welders.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I think even like a stock Optera, if you put a 20 amp hour 4S battery into a stock 2-meter Optera, that'll happily fly for 3 hours. That's a lithium polymer battery. Straight off, you don't need to do any optimization, no lithium-ion batteries, straight out of the box. If that's really what you want, that you can do it quite happily. You don't need to do any of this complex stuff.
So, I mean,
and I'm also saying I don't recommend that. That isn't what I recommend. If it all comes part in part. If you're not experienced enough with soldering up lithium-ion batteries, then you're probably not at the point where you should be doing long range. So, generally it all comes, you get all of that experience at the same time, and it all comes together.
Yeah. And also,
if you don't feel happy with one particular bit, there are definitely ways around it.
Yeah. And it's also useless to set up lithium-ion packs if your plane pulls 10 amps continuously in cruise. So first of all, you have to start at the beginning, and that's at the plane. You have to select the right power plant. You have to select the right ESC, motor, propeller. Everything needs to be correct. So you have to drop down the current draw as much as possible. And then if you are on that limit where you can't save any more power on the plane itself, and you still want to have more flight time, then you can think about using lithium ion at the last step.
Yeah, so I couldn't have said it better.
What's the heaviest plane you guys have flown?
15 kilos, something like that.
Jeez.
Holy! Okay, Talon GT with 1.52 kilograms.
I don't know. It'd be my nitro plane, I guess. I don't know how much it weighs.
Yeah.
Probably 2 kilograms, something like that, maybe 3.
Yeah, 2 kilos is about as heavy as I've gone. The point is that when you get into that 15 kilogram plane, that is a massive, heavily plane.
The 15 kilo plane, it was literally just an experiment to see how big I could make a plane and still get it in my mum's car and take it to the field. There was no other point to doing it other than to see if I could do it. It was terrible in every way. It was underpowered, flew horribly, but it was fun to do.
For me, the heaviest plane will be soon the Mini Talon, if I can get it up in the air. Unfortunately, it's not mine. It's from a friend who borrowed it to me to set it up and tune it. But yeah, it will be at about 1.8 to 1.9 kilograms.
And that's like one of the things I've been noticing is like a lot of these planes, it seems like long range FPV was really strong, I would say, coming around 2015, 2016. And that's why you needed the Sky Hunters and those huge planes. But what we're seeing now is the miniaturization of just about everything in the hobby. And so, you know, you don't need to have something that weighs 10 kilograms to fly long range FPV. Mark's doing great with something that weighs less than 500 grams.
Yeah, 266 grams, my Dart 250G with 90 minutes of flight time. And I could even go for a 3S lithium ion on that plane. Maybe then I should switch to... I could still use the 5-inch prop, but I shouldn't do full throttle runs then. But with 3S lithium ion, it could easily achieve more than 2 hours of flight time. That's no problem.
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing. And you're talking about the mini Talon. That plane can hold 4 or 5 kilograms.
Not quite that much.
No.
Certainly 3 kilos.
3 kilos. Okay.
Takeoff weight 2.5.
Yeah.
Okay, so a 3 kilo plane. That is a heavy plane.
But then, if you really build it up to 3 kilograms, you really need a slingshot launch.
You need a bungee. Yeah.
Yeah, you can launch it by hand then. So it's already hard to launch on the default rate. So it usually uses about 600 grams of battery. Then the CG is correct with the pan and tilt system on the nose. And yeah, if you have that all together, it's about 1.9 kilograms. It's already really heavy, and 1.9 kilograms or close to 2 kilograms at what's the wingspan? I think 1.30 meters. Or 1.40 meters roundabout, it's already pretty heavy. So it's about this
1300, isn't it? 1300.
Yeah, I think so. And it's about the same wing load as my Talon GT has with 1.4 kilograms. And I know how hard it is to launch this plane when it's so heavy.
I mean, that's one of my favorite things about my long range plane. One of the most important things to me. I want to have lots of power. So that it would take off. I can just hold it vertically and let it go out of my hand, and I can catch it. And that's because it's got a 1600mm wingspan. It only weighs 1.8 kilos with the full 24,000 milliamp hour battery, which it makes a big difference. The usability factor when you have that kind of thing. If you have a high usability factor, you end up flying it more, getting more experience, and that means when you do long range flights, it'll be safer.
So one of the things I've picked up on what we've been talking about is the best thing to get sorted for long range, rather than just jumping to a different battery, is to get efficiency. Now, one of the things that we discussed after last time was different cell counts and efficiency.
Don't even get me started.
Luke knows where this is going. Because right, the common thought is you put more cells on, you get a more efficient plane. Is that necessarily the case?
No, not even slightly. There's no more efficient cell configuration than any other. Just like there's no more efficient motor than any other. It's all about how you use it in the rest of your system, how you fly, even just efficiency. It's used in the group as like the be all and end all of efficiency. It's what you need. Efficiency is something very specific. It's power in versus power out. When you're using it for anything other than that, like when we're saying how much energy does it take to go a certain range, well, it becomes a lot harder to define. You kind of have to put the things on it about, well, it's a plane of this size, you're going this speed. It's because obviously if you could fly half the speed and you'd get lots more efficiency. So yeah, it's a very complicated subject, but no, adding more cells does not automatically give you more efficiency, unless you just so happened to have a setup that needed more cells.
Yeah, so it's the same example with my two AR ring setups. The high performance setup actually has a higher airframe efficiency than my long range setup. because my FPV antenna is much smaller. It's has much less air resistance. I don't have additional openings in the canopy for the antenna that can cause any air resistance. I have the slim wood ringlets on it that also has less air resistance. So just by the airframe, my high-speed setup is more efficient than my long-range setup. My long-range setup just has a much lower-powered motor setup, a bigger propeller, and it's especially software side tuned to be as efficient as possible, because it flies really slow as possible to stay stable, even in winds. And I think that's a bigger point at the end than the pure motor efficiency. That's just a very small part.
Yeah, and it's a great example. When I posted the video of my 250-gram speed plane with the OSD, everybody was saying how efficient it was. It's only drawing 1.2 kilowatts and it's going 200 miles an hour. That's amazing. If you take a big drag, it's drawing 5 kilowatts to go that speed. But they don't take into account that it's a tenth the size. Obviously, that doesn't make it more efficient. It's just a different setup being used in a different way. It's actually terribly inefficient compared to a big drag for a variety of reasons that are irrelevant. But it's
so
it's all about the rest of what you've got.
Yeah, so that's also a good comparison with the mini drag. If I see a mini drag flying 180, 190 kilometers per hour, they usually pull about between 70 and 90 amps. If I do the same speed with my AR ring, I pull 44 amps.
Exactly,
to reach the same speed. But on the other hand, if I compare this AR ring with another setup someone recently posted in the group, he also reached about 180, 185 kilometers per hour with his AR ring, but on 5S and with a current draw of 50 amps. So he needed way more power than I to gain the same speed at the end.
And that is a classic case where you can say, yes, his one was less efficient. It's the same plane, presumably about the same weight, the same speed. The only difference is more power going in. So we can say same power out, more power going in, less efficiency.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to compare efficiency when you haven't got everything else exactly the same.
Yeah. So, and the thing you gotta keep in mind too is, like, when we're talking about efficiency, is that when you're doing long range FPV, you're not shooting the gaps into trees 5 miles away. You are out there trying to go as far as you possibly can. So it's flying as level and as low energy as possible. And to a lot of people who want to shoot gaps into trees, that's the most boring thing you could ever imagine.
This is why I can't fly long distance. I'm too heavy with the left hand, so the throttle always goes forward.
So you can save a channel by putting the throttle on a switch or so.
Yeah.
I know someone that should do that. I mean, I've tried it. I will go and I'll fly maybe quarter throttle or half throttle just for a bit, but I guarantee at some point in the flight I will be right. I really need to go full throttle now and have some fun for a bit. I'm just not built for it.
You need to do what I do, where I get all of that high throttle stuff out of my system with the line of sight flying, and then I go and do a 4-hour FPV flight afterwards.
I think what it is, I just need different planes for different tasks. So
exactly, yeah. Having a nice variety of planes is so good. I like, my dad always used to say to me, "Why do you have so many planes? They all fly. They all do the same thing." And no, it's not how it works. They're all so different.
No, you got to fly fast FPV as well, though. It's just chasing your shadow along the ground, stuff like that. You got to enjoy that.
So we're wrapping this up because this has gone on for quite a while, but wanted to just ask you guys: is your INAV plane ever really done? So
No.
Never.
No.
If it's
Until
done,
it
then
crashes.
you're just not thinking about hard enough to make it better.
that's exactly right.
And-
Yeah,
And if my planes are done, basically they are done right now, but INAV 2.5 is around the corner with new features and new settings, and I will go over all of them and just try them out and just continue optimizing them.
they're basically done when they end up in bin bags. That's
Yeah.
what-
That was what I said to Steve. With my line of sight planes, it's very easy to tell when they're done because normally they get crashed within the next week or so. But with my INAV planes, they seem to last for ages, so I just keep on going and going and going. I have to keep making improvements, otherwise I get bored with them.
Yeah, I was kind of explaining to someone I was talking to when I was flying my plane. I was asking, I said, it's about half of it is flying the plane. The other half is getting ready to fly the plane and thinking about what you can change, what you can improve, and learning a little bit more all the time. That's why I'm excited about what we're doing here with the website, so that you can actually, we can experience new things and improve these planes and learn more from this. So guys, thank you so much. Today was awesome. It was a big day. And Luke, thank you for coming here.
Yeah, it's fine.
This is great having you.
I'll have to join next week or whatever if you're talking about similar stuff.
Yeah. We'll find out what people, from your last appearance, people were writing in like, wow, this was fantastic, well worth the time. So we might have to break this particular one up into 2 different episodes, but this is absolutely fantastic. Thanks for the energy. This is a great all-around conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we've really blasted over the topics. There's so much more detail to be gone in with each of these. Just thinking about like the propeller topics and the ones we've already been over, I have so many more things to add already. It could be another 3-hour podcast quite happily.
And something for the chat and for everyone who's still there. Look at the website, and if you have any advices, any tips for us, or any wishes you want to see there, just post it in the group and or ask Steve, Darren, or me, and we can talk about that to add something. If you have recommendations for plane setups or any recommended hardware, you know it's very good and flight proof and all that stuff, just send it to us, and we will look if we can add it too.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. See ya.
See ya. Bye.
Bye, guys. Okay, stream is offline. Woo!